Laura Samuels was a 34-year-old marketing executive living in Sacramento, California. She worked at a big company called Bright Ideas Marketing. Laura was well known at work for her ambitious nature and drive to succeed. She balanced her busy job with a warm and friendly personality, which made her popular among her coworkers and friends. Laura loved outdoor activities, especially hiking and camping. She often took trips to Yosemite National Park and Lake Tahoe. She was also a member of a local book club, where she enjoyed discussing her favorite novels by the author Joyce Lehman. Laura's friends described her as kind-hearted and always ready to help others. She had a bright smile that could light up a room. In June 2010, Laura was planning a special camping trip with her family. She and her husband, Carl, along with their 2 children, Ponderosa, age 10, and Velveeta, age 8, were excited about their upcoming adventure. Laura had already packed their tent, sleeping bags, and food supplies. She had even bought new hiking boots from L.L. Bean for the trip. Laura's children were looking forward to roasting marshmallows and telling stories around the campfire. At work, Laura was expecting a big promotion. Her boss had hinted that she might become the new head of the marketing department. This promotion was a dream come true for Laura, who had worked hard for many years. She was excited about the future and looking forward to the new challenges and opportunities it would bring. Laura was also very close to her family. Her parents lived in nearby Vacaville and often visited to spend time with their grandchildren. Laura's sister, Emily, lived in Los Angeles, but they kept in touch regularly through phone calls and emails. Laura cherished these relationships and made sure to stay connected with her loved ones. In the days before her death, Laura was full of life and excitement. She was looking forward to the camping trip and the possibility of a promotion at work. Her friends and family remember her as a loving and caring person who always put others first. Laura's tragic death was a shocking and heartbreaking loss to everyone who knew her. On the morning of June 14, 2010, Carl Samuels woke up early to get ready for work. It was around 7:00 a.m., and the sun was shining brightly in Sacramento, California. Carl noticed that his wife, Laura, was not in bed. Thinking she might be in the kitchen, he went downstairs. To his horror, he found Laura's lifeless body in the living room. Laura had been beaten to death with a hairbrush. Her face was bruised, and there were signs of a struggle. Carl immediately called 911. His voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had found. He was in shock, unable to believe that his loving wife was gone. The 911 operator, calmly taking down details, dispatched police and emergency services to the Samuels home. Carl sat by Laura's body, tears streaming down his face, waiting for help to arrive. He felt a mix of grief, confusion, and disbelief. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics confirmed that Laura was dead, and police officers quickly secured the area. Carl was visibly shaken and struggled to answer questions. He kept repeating how much he loved Laura and how he couldn't understand who would want to hurt her. The detectives noted his distress, but also kept in mind that in such cases, the spouse is often a person of interest. Outside, neighbors started to gather, curious about the police presence. The news quickly spread through the community. Local TV stations, such as KCRA3, began reporting on the incident, mentioning Laura's name and describing her as a well-liked member of the community. By late morning, the house was a hub of activity. Forensic experts arrived to collect more evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, took samples from the crime scene, and carefully bagged the hairbrush as evidence. Every detail was documented meticulously. As the day went on, the reality of Laura's death began to sink in for her friends and family. Calls and messages poured in, expressing shock and sorrow. The news of her death left everyone who knew her in a state of disbelief, trying to come to terms with the tragic loss of a beloved wife, mother, and friend. The Sacramento police responded quickly to the 911 call on June 14, 2010. Within minutes, officers and emergency responders arrived at the Samuels home. Detective Patricia Johnson and her partner, Detective Mark Hernandez, led the investigation. Detective Johnson, known for her sharp eye and dedication, and Detective Hernandez, famous for his thorough and careful work, immediately took charge. The crime scene was a disturbing sight. Laura Samuels lay on the living room floor, clearly beaten to death with a hairbrush found nearby. Blood was spattered on the carpet, and furniture was knocked over, showing signs of a violent struggle. The scene was otherwise clean, suggesting that the attacker might have tried to cover their tracks. The detectives began by securing the area to ensure no one could disturb the evidence. They carefully documented everything, taking photographs and making detailed notes. Forensic experts arrived shortly after to collect physical evidence. They dusted for fingerprints on the hairbrush, furniture, and door handles. They also took samples of blood and other potential DNA evidence from the scene. Detective Johnson spoke with Carl Samuels, who was visibly shaken and in tears. She asked him about the events leading up to the discovery of Laura's body. Carl explained that he had woken up early to get ready for work and found Laura in the living room. He had no idea who could have done this to her. While Johnson interviewed Carl, Detective Hernandez examined the rest of the house. He looked for any signs of forced entry, but found none. This suggested that Laura might have known her attacker and let them in. Hernandez noted the absence of defensive wounds on Laura's hands, which indicated she was caught off guard. Neighbors began to gather outside, watching the police activity. Some were interviewed by the detectives, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that morning. The community was shocked and scared, as Laura was well-liked and her death was a terrible blow to everyone who knew her. By noon, the detectives had collected all the evidence they could find. They bagged the hairbrush and other items for further analysis at the crime lab. The coroner arrived to take Laura's body for an autopsy, which would provide more details about the time and cause of death. Detective Johnson and Hernandez spent the rest of the day reviewing the evidence and planning their next steps. They knew they had a difficult case ahead of them, but were determined to find justice for Laura and her family. Carl Samuels, the husband of Laura Samuels, was the first suspect in the investigation. Carl was 37 years old and worked as a software developer. He was known to be intelligent, but also quite introverted, often spending more time with his computer than with people. Carl was a devoted husband, but in recent months he had become distant and stressed, which friends noticed. The police brought Carl in for questioning at the Sacramento Police Department on June 15, 2010. Detective Patricia Johnson and Detective Mark Hernandez led the interrogation. Carl appeared exhausted and heartbroken. His eyes were red from crying, and he seemed genuinely distraught over Laura's death. Detective Johnson started by asking Carl about his relationship with Laura. Carl explained that they had been married for 12 years and had 2 children, Ponderosa, age 10, and Velveeta, age 8. He admitted that their marriage had been strained lately due to their decision to participate in a wife swap sex fantasy. Carl had pushed Laura to participate in this fantasy with another couple, Jessica and Kenneth Planters. This obsession had caused tension between him and Laura. When asked about the night of Laura's death, Carl stated that he had been working late on a state government contract for his job at a well-known tech company, TechWave. He said he went to bed around midnight and didn't wake up until the next morning when he found Laura's body. His alibi was weak since he had been home alone during the time of the murder. Detective Hernandez asked Carl about his relationship with Jessica Planters. Carl admitted that he found Jessica attractive and that they had sex with each other many times, but he insisted that nothing that had nothing to do with the murder. He was visibly uncomfortable and kept fidgeting during this part of the questioning. The detectives noted Carl's stress and anxiety, but also his apparent grief. They asked him about any recent arguments with Laura. Carl mentioned that they had fought about the wife swap fantasy and his interest in sexual experimentation a few days before her death. Laura had been upset and told him she didn't want to participate anymore, which had frustrated Carl. Despite his emotional state, Carl cooperated fully with the police. He provided access to his phone and computer for further investigation. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez were cautious but still considered him a suspect. They needed more evidence to either confirm his involvement or clear him of suspicion. As the questioning concluded, Carl was allowed to go home but was instructed not to leave town. The detectives continued to gather information, knowing they had to explore all possible angles in the case to find the truth about who killed Laura Samuels. The second suspect in the investigation was Jessica Planters, a 32-year-old yoga instructor. Jessica was outgoing and charismatic, known for her sociable nature. She taught yoga at a popular studio in downtown Sacramento called Zen Flow Yoga. Many people in the community admired her free-spirited attitude and ability to connect with others. Jessica was part of the wife swap arrangement with Laura and Carl Samuels and her husband, Kenneth. She had developed an unhealthy obsession with Carl and had been trying to convince him to leave Laura for her. Detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez brought Jessica in for questioning on June 16, 2010, at the Sacramento Police Department. Jessica arrived wearing casual yoga attire, looking calm and composed. Detective Johnson began by asking Jessica about her relationship with Carl. Jessica openly admitted that loved sexually experimenting with Carl and had strong feelings for him. She said she believed Carl felt the same way but was torn because of his marriage to Laura. When questioned about the night of Laura's death, Jessica claimed she was at home with her husband, Kenneth. She said they had watched a movie and gone to bed early. However, Detective Hernandez pointed out that there were no witnesses to confirm her alibi, making it weak. Jessica then talked about the wife swap arrangement. She explained that it was Carl's idea and that Laura had reluctantly agreed. Jessica saw it as a great opportunity to have sex with Carl. She admitted that she had been trying to convince Carl to leave Laura, but she denied any involvement in Laura's death. The detectives noticed that while Jessica was cooperative, she seemed to be hiding something. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the seriousness of the situation. They pressed her about her obsession with Carl and whether it could have driven her to harm Laura. Jessica maintained her innocence, insisting she would never hurt anyone. During the interrogation, Jessica's phone records were examined. They revealed multiple calls and messages to Carl, including some sent on the night of the murder. This evidence raised further suspicion, as it showed Jessica's intense interest in Carl. Despite her cooperation, Jessica's obsession with Carl and her weak alibi made her a strong suspect. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to either implicate or exonerate her. They continued to investigate her background, looking for any clues that could link her to Laura's murder. As the questioning ended, Jessica was allowed to leave but was instructed not to leave town. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez remained determined to uncover the truth, knowing that Jessica's possible involvement in the crime needed to be thoroughly explored. On June 18, 2010, 4 days after Laura Samuel's tragic death, new evidence emerged that gave the investigation a crucial breakthrough. That morning, it was cloudy and cool in Sacramento. Detective Patricia Johnson received a call from a neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Turner, who lived 2 houses down from the Samuels' home. Mrs. Turner mentioned she had found something unusual while walking her dog in a nearby park called Land Park. Mrs. Turner had noticed a discarded bag under a bush near a picnic area. Inside the bag, she found a pair of bloody gloves and a smartphone. She immediately called the police, and Detectives Johnson and Hernandez arrived at the scene within 30 minutes. They carefully collected the bag and its contents, placing them in evidence bags to avoid contamination. Back at the Sacramento Police Department, the detectives examined the new evidence. The bloody gloves were sent to the crime lab for DNA analysis. The smartphone, which was locked, was taken to the tech department to be unlocked and analyzed. Detective Hernandez noted the phone was a newer model, an iPhone 4, which had just been released a few weeks earlier. While waiting for the results, the detectives reviewed their notes on the case. The bloody gloves suggested the killer had tried to dispose of evidence far from the crime scene. The smartphone could potentially belong to the killer or someone connected to the crime. Later that afternoon, the crime lab called with the DNA results. The blood on the gloves matched Laura Samuels, but there was also another DNA profile on the inside of the gloves. The profile did not match Carl Samuels, which was a significant finding. The tech department also managed to unlock the smartphone. It was registered to Jessica Planters, the yoga instructor and second suspect. The detectives found numerous messages and call logs between Jessica and Carl, including some from the night of the murder. Additionally, there were messages that showed Jessica's increasing frustration and jealousy toward Laura. Detective Johnson and Hernandez were surprised by this new evidence. The messages revealed that Jessica had been trying to manipulate Carl into leading Laura, but her efforts had been unsuccessful. They now had a stronger case against Jessica, as the gloves and the smartphone linked her more directly to the crime. The detectives planned their next steps carefully. They knew they needed to bring Jessica back in for questioning with this new evidence. The case was starting to come together, but they still needed to ensure all details were thoroughly investigated. As the day ended, the detectives felt a renewed sense of purpose. The new evidence had provided a crucial lead, and they were determined to follow it to uncover the full truth behind Laura Samuel's murder. The third suspect in the investigation was Kenneth Planters, a 34-year-old personal trainer. Kenneth was known for his confidence and charm. He worked at a popular gym in Sacramento called Fit Life Gym, where he trained clients and participated in competitive sports. Kenneth was supportive of his wife Jessica's free-spirited nature and had participated in the wife swap arrangement with Laura and Carl Samuels. However, Kenneth had become increasingly jealous and suspicious. Detectives Patricia Johnson and Mark Hernandez brought Kenneth in for questioning on June 19, 2010. Kenneth arrived at the Sacramento Police Department wearing a Fit Life Gym t-shirt and jeans. He appeared nervous but tried to remain composed. Detective Johnson began by asking Kenneth about his relationship with Jessica. Kenneth explained that they had been married for 8 years and had a mostly happy marriage. However, he admitted that the wife swap arrangement had caused tension. Kenneth confessed that he had become uncomfortable with the arrangement, as he was developing feelings for Carl Samuels and felt left out. When asked about the night of Laura's murder, Kenneth claimed he was at home with Jessica. He said they had watched a movie, Iron Man 2, which had been released a few weeks earlier, and went to bed early. Kenneth's alibi was the same as Jessica's, but the detectives were skeptical due to the new evidence linking Jessica to the crime. Detective Hernandez questioned Kenneth about his feelings towards Laura. Kenneth stated that he liked Laura and had no reason to harm her. He seemed genuinely upset about Laura's death and insisted he had nothing to do with it. However, his jealousy and discomfort with the wife swap arrangement were noted by the detectives. The detectives then presented Kenneth with the new evidence: the bloody gloves and the smartphone found in Land Park. Kenneth was visibly shocked and denied any knowledge of the items. He insisted that he had no reason to hurt Laura and was being truthful about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Despite his cooperation, Kenneth's weak alibi and growing jealousy made him a suspect. The detectives decided to keep a close eye on him while they continued to investigate Jessica. They believed that Kenneth might have more information about the crime and Jessica's involvement. As the questioning ended, Kenneth was allowed to leave, but was instructed not to leave town. Detectives Johnson and Hernandez were determined to uncover the full truth, knowing that the evidence was leading them closer to solving the case. On June 20, 2010, the Sacramento police made a breakthrough in the Laura Samuels case. After carefully examining all the evidence, they identified Jessica Planters as the murderer. Jessica, a 32-year-old yoga instructor, had developed an unhealthy obsession with Carl Samuels, Laura's husband. Jessica believed that if Laura were out of the picture, Carl would be with her. The detectives pieced together how Jessica went about killing Laura. On the night of June 13, 2010, Jessica had gone to the Samuels home. She knew Carl would be working late, and Laura would be alone. Using a hairbrush, she brutally beat Laura, ensuring there was no noise to alert the neighbors. Jessica then staged the scene to look like a struggle, hoping it would mislead the police. Jessica's motive was her deep obsession with Carl and her desire to replace Laura in his life. She thought eliminating Laura would make Carl choose her. Additionally, she wanted to frame her own husband, Kenneth, for the murder, ensuring both her romantic rival and unsatisfactory husband were out of the picture. On June 20, around 2:00 p.m., Detective Patricia Johnson and Detective Mark Hernandez went to Jessica's home to arrest her. The sky was overcast, reflecting the somber mood. Jessica was taken by surprise. She had been teaching a yoga class at Zen Flow Yoga when the detectives arrived. When they informed her of the arrest, Jessica initially tried to maintain her composure but soon broke down, crying and pleading her innocence. The police handcuffed Jessica and escorted her out of the studio. The news spread quickly, and local media, including KCRA3 and Fox 40, covered the arrest. The community was shocked as they watched Jessica, a once admired yoga instructor, being taken away by the police. Laura's family reacted with a mix of relief and sorrow upon hearing of Jessica's arrest. Carl Samuels was devastated by the betrayal, realizing that someone he knew and trusted was responsible for his wife's death. He struggled to come to terms with the loss and the horrific manner in which it happened. Laura's children, Ponderosa and Velveeta, were too young to fully understand, but they sensed the gravity of the situation. As Jessica was taken to the Sacramento Police Department, the detectives felt a sense of accomplishment. They had successfully identified and apprehended the person responsible for Laura's brutal murder. However, they knew the case was far from over as they prepared for the upcoming trial. The trial of Jessica Planters began on September 15, 2010, in the Sacramento County Courthouse. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Lisa Kamabakuro, a 45-year-old known for her sharp legal mind and strong courtroom presence, presented a compelling case against Jessica. Kamabakuro argued that Jessica's obsession with Carl Samuels and her desire to eliminate Laura as a rival drove her to commit the murder. She detailed the evidence, including the bloody gloves and the smartphone found in Land Park, which connected Jessica to the crime scene. On the defense side, attorney Michael Rachmanoff, a 50-year-old with a reputation for taking on challenging cases, argued that Jessica was innocent and framed by someone else. Rachmaninoff claimed that there was no direct evidence linking Jessica to the murder and that the police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects, including Kenneth Planters. He also suggested that the DNA evidence on the gloves could have been planted. During the trial, Laura Samuels' family sat in the courtroom, watching with heavy hearts. Carl Samuels, Laura's husband, appeared distraught, often holding back tears. Their children, Ponderosa and Velveeta, were not present, as they were too young to witness the trial's emotional intensity. Friends and community members who knew Laura described her as a loving mother and a dedicated professional, making the crime even more heartbreaking. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On September 25, 2010, they returned with a verdict. Jessica Planters was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with a mix of relief and sorrow as the judge announced the verdict. Jessica showed little emotion, maintaining a stoic expression. Her plan to eliminate Laura and frame Kenneth had failed, and she now faced the consequences of her actions. During the sentencing phase, Laura's family members gave emotional statements. Carla spoke about the devastating impact of losing Laura and how it had affected their children. The judge sentenced Jessica Planters to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was seen as just by Laura's family, but it could never fully heal the pain of their loss. The verdict in sentencing had a profound effect on everyone involved. Laura's family felt a sense of closure, knowing that justice had been served. The community, shocked by the crime, began to heal, though the memory of Laura's tragic death lingered. Jessica's conviction sent a message that such a calculated and violent act would not go unpunished. As the trial concluded, those who knew Laura hoped to remember her for the vibrant and loving person she was, rather than the brutal way she was taken from them. After the trial, light slowly began to move on for everyone involved in the case. Carl Samuels, now a single father, focused on caring for his children, Ponderosa and Velveeta. He decided to move out of their Sacramento home, seeking a fresh start. They relocated to a smaller town nearby, where they could begin healing away from the painful memories. Carl took a leave of absence from his job at TechWave to spend more time with his children. He enrolled them in a new school and joined a support group for grieving spouses, finding solace in talking to others who had experienced similar losses. He also sought therapy for both himself and his children to help them cope with the trauma of losing Laura. Jessica Planters, now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole, was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. In prison, she became isolated, with few visitors and little contact with the outside world. Her obsession with Carl and her misguided actions had led her to a life behind bars, far from the free-spirited yoga instructor she once was. Kenneth Planters, Jessica's husband, struggled to rebuild his life. He left Sacramento and moved to San Francisco, where he found a new job as a personal trainer at a different gym. He sought counseling to deal with his feelings of betrayal and confusion. Kenneth tried to move forward but remained deeply affected by the events and the realization that his wife was capable of such violence. In the years following the trial, those touched by Laura's life and tragic death worked to find peace and healing. While the pain of her loss remained, they found ways to move forward, carrying Laura's memory with them and striving to live their lives with the same warmth and determination she had shown. Larry Harrison was a 42-year-old man who managed a popular Applebee's in Rochester, Minnesota. He was known for being warm and friendly. Larry was a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings and loved watching their games. He lived with his wife, Lauren, and their teenage son. They had a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood where they had lived for many years. Larry's family meant everything to him. He and Lauren had been married for over 15 years. They met in college and quickly fell in love. Larry was a devoted father who always found time for his son Brian, whether it was helping with homework or coaching his little elite team. Larry's friendly nature made him a well-loved figure in Rochester. He often volunteered at the local food bank and participated in community cleanup events. In the days leading up to his death, Larry was busy planning a community event at his restaurant to celebrate the end of the football season. He wanted to bring people together for a big feast, featuring everyone's favorite dishes and, of course, the game highlights. The Super Bowl had just taken place on February 1, 2015, with the New England Patriots defeating the Seattle Seahawks. Larry was excited about the event and had been working extra hours to make sure everything was perfect. Larry also had personal plans. He was looking forward to a family trip to the Mall of America, where they planned to visit the amusement park and shop at their favorite stores. Larry was a simple man who found joy in everyday moments with his family and friends. In summary, Larry Harrison was a man who cared deeply about his family, his community, and his work. He was loved by many and had a bright future ahead of him, full of dreams and plans. His untimely death was a shock to everyone who knew him, leaving a void that could never be filled. On the morning of February 8, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., Lauren Harrison found her husband, Larry, dead in their kitchen. It was a cold and snowy day in Rochester, Minnesota. Lauren had woken up early to prepare breakfast. As she walked into the kitchen, she was met with a horrifying scene. Larry's body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been stabbed multiple times. The sight was shocking and terrifying. Lauren immediately screamed for help. Her loud cries woke up the neighbors, who quickly rushed over to see what was happening. One of the neighbors, Mary Benedictus, who lived next door, ran over to check on Lauren. When she saw the gruesome scene, she quickly called 911. Mary described feeling a mix of fear and disbelief. She had known Larry for years and couldn't believe something so horrible could happen. It was like a nightmare, she later told the local news. Larry was such a kind man. I couldn't understand why anyone would do this to him. The 911 operators stayed on the phone with Mary, trying to keep her calm while emergency services were on their way. Lauren, in shock and grief, could barely speak. She kept repeating Larry's name, unable to comprehend the brutal reality before her. Within minutes, the police and paramedics arrived. The first officer on the scene noted the look of absolute horror on Lauren's face. He tried to comfort her while securing the area. Paramedics quickly assessed Larry, but it was clear that he had been dead for some time. News of Larry's death spread quickly through the small town. Local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, reported the shocking incident. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Harrison home, exchanging whispers and offering support to Lauren and her son. The local community, which had been buzzing with post-Super Bowl excitement just a week earlier, was now in a state of shock and mourning. The discovery of Larry Harrison's body marked the beginning of a tragic and complex investigation, one that would reveal dark secrets and shake the community to its core. The Rochester Police Department arrived quickly at the Harrison home on the morning of February 8, 2015. They secured the area and tried to comfort a shocked and distraught Lauren Harrison. The paramedics soon arrived and confirmed that Larry Harrison was dead. Detective Jonathan Gustafson, a veteran with over 20 years on the force, and Detective Sarah Brown, known for her sharp instincts, were assigned to lead the investigation. They arrived shortly after the initial officers. Detective Gustafson was known for his methodical approach, while Detective Brown had a keen eye for detail. The crime scene in the kitchen was gruesome. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the countertops, and even splattered on the walls. Larry had been stabbed multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. The detectives noted that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Larry might have known his attacker. Detectives Gustafson and Brown started their investigation by examining the body. Larry had defensive wounds on his arms, which meant he tried to fight off his attacker. The detectives then began to collect evidence. They took fingerprints, blood samples, and photographs of the scene. They'd also collected the knife used in the attack, which was found near Larry's body. Forensic experts were called in to help analyze the evidence. They used tools like luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and UV lights to find any traces of bodily fluids. They also used a technique called blood stain pattern analysis to understand how the attack happened. This helped them piece together the events leading up to Larry's death. The detectives interviewed Lauren, who was still in shock. She couldn't provide much information at first, but she did mention hearing a noise in the kitchen during the night. The police also talked to the neighbors, including Mary Benedictus, who had called 911. Mary didn't see or hear anything unusual that night, which added to the mystery. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the story extensively. The community was in shock. Everyone wanted to know who could have done such a horrible thing to Larry, a well-loved and respected member of their town. The police set up a tip line, hoping someone might come forward with information. As the investigation progressed, the detectives knew they had to act quickly. The evidence pointed to someone close to Larry, but they needed more proof to make an arrest. The crime scene was just the beginning of a complicated and heartbreaking case. The first person the police investigated was Lauren Harrison, Larry's wife. Lauren was 38 years old and worked as a nurse at the local Mayo Clinic. She was known for her caring nature, but the detectives had to look closely at everyone connected to Larry. Lauren had been married to Larry for over 15 years. On the surface, they seemed like a happy couple, but the investigation revealed some troubling secrets. Lauren was having sex with Carmen Wilson, her 18-year-old son's best friend. This affair put a strain on her marriage and made her a suspect in Larry's murder. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Lauren in for questioning. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Lauren appeared nervous and upset, which was understandable given the circumstances. The detectives asked her about her relationship with Larry and if there were any problems in their marriage. Lauren admitted to the affair with Garman, but insisted she still loved Larry and would never hurt him. The detectives pressed Lauren about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. She claimed she was at home, asleep, and didn't hear anything unusual until she found Larry's body the next morning. The detectives noted her emotional responses, which seemed genuine, but they couldn't rule her out as a suspect just yet. They also asked Lauren about any arguments she and Larry might have had recently. She mentioned that they had been fighting about her affair, but she denied that these arguments ever got physical. Lauren's responses were consistent, but the detectives needed more evidence to determine her involvement in Larry's death. Throughout the investigation, Lauren maintained her innocence. She was cooperative but clearly devastated by Larry's death. Her emotions ranged from sadness to anger as she tried to come to terms with what had happened. The detectives had to consider every possibility, but Lauren's cooperation and the lack of direct evidence against her made it difficult to build a strong case. The police also looked into Lauren's phone records and financial statements. They found no suspicious activity that could link her directly to the murder. However, the affair with Garman Wilson remained a significant point of interest. The detectives decided to bring Garman in for questioning as well, hoping he might shed more light on the situation. As the police continued to investigate, they realized they needed to look at other potential suspects. Lauren's affair was a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it didn't provide all the answers. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. With the discovery of Lauren's affair, the police turned their attention to Garman Wilson, the 18-year-old best friend of Larry's son and Lauren's secret lover. Garman was a high school senior and part-time mechanic. He was well-liked and charismatic, but his relationship with Lauren put him in a complicated situation. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Garman in for questioning on February 9, 2015. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Garman appeared nervous but cooperative. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Lauren and how it might have affected Larry. Garman admitted to having sex with Lauren, saying it started a few months ago. He insisted that he had no problems with Larry and that Larry never knew about the affair. Garman claimed he had been home on the night of the murder, working on a car in his garage. His alibi seemed plausible, but the detectives needed to verify it. The police also questioned Garman about his feelings toward Larry. Garman described Larry as a father figure and said he admired him. He was adamant that he had no reason to harm Larry and was deeply saddened by his death. Garman's emotions appeared genuine, but the detectives couldn't ignore the affair and its potential impact. To check Garman's alibi, the detectives visited his home and garage. They found the car he claimed to have been working on and interviewed his parents, who confirmed that Garman was home that night. The alibi held up, but the detectives remained cautious. Detectives Gustafson and Brown also looked into Garman's phone records and social media. They found many graphic sexts and naked pictures sent between Garman and Lauren, but nothing that suggested Garman was involved in the murder. The text showed a sexual relationship, but there were no threats or plans to harm Larry. Garman's responses during the interrogation were calm and consistent. He showed genuine concern for Lauren and her son, and his cooperation with the police helped his case. However, the detectives still considered him a suspect due to his close relationship with Lauren and the potential motive stemming from the affair. The investigation into Garman revealed no direct evidence linking him to Larry's murder. His alibi and the lack of incriminating messages made it difficult for the police to build a case against him. While Garman remained a person of interest, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to either confirm or clear his involvement. As the police continued their investigation, they realized Garman's involvement in the affair complicated the case, but it also highlighted the tangled relationships within the Harrison household. On February 10, 2015, just 2 days after Larry Harrison's murder, a heavy snowstorm hit Rochester, Minnesota. Despite the harsh weather, the police continued their investigation. That afternoon, Detective Sarah Brown discovered a crucial piece of evidence in an unexpected place. While searching through the house again, Detective Brown decided to take a closer look in the bedroom of Margaret Smith, Lauren's mother. Margaret, 64, lived with a Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues. Detective Brown found a series of hidden letters in Margaret's room. These letters were shocking and disturbing. The letters were addressed to Larry and were sexually explicit. They revealed that Margaret had a deep, unhealthy obsession with her son-in-law. She believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This discovery changed the direction of the investigation dramatically. Detectives Brown and Gustafson immediately focused their attention on Margaret. They were stunned by the content of the letters. It was clear that Margaret's feelings for Larry were far from normal. The detectives also found that Margaret had recently stopped taking her medication for schizophrenia because she felt the drugs gave her tardive dyskinesia, a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary, repetitive movements, often resulting from long-term use of certain antipsychotic medications. The police interviewed Lauren again, this time asking about her mother. Lauren admitted that Margaret had always been very controlling and a little off. Margaret's mental health issues made her behavior unpredictable. Lauren was shocked to learn about the letters and the extent of her mother's obsession with Larry. Forensic experts analyzed the letters and confirmed they were written by Margaret. The police also looked into Margaret's medical records and found she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The discovery of the letters was a turning point in the case. It provided the detectives with a new motive and a deeper understanding of the dynamics within the Harrison household. The investigation was far from over, but the police were getting closer to uncovering the truth about who killed Larry Harrison. The detectives now had a new prime suspect. Margaret's obsession with Larry, combined with her mental health issues, made her a likely candidate for the murder. However, they needed more evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention back to Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law. Margaret lived with the Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues, including schizophrenia. She was taking medication that caused tardive dyskinesia, a condition that made her movements erratic. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Margaret in for a more thorough interrogation on February 12, 2015. Margaret was initially calm, but became defensive when asked about the sexually explicit letters she had written to Larry. She admitted to writing the letters, but claimed they were harmless expressions of her feelings. The detectives questioned Margaret about her relationship with Larry. She described him as a kind and caring man, but her obsession with him was clear. Margaret believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This belief had driven her to write the letters and behave in a controlling manner toward her daughter, Lauren. Margaret's mental health issues were a significant factor in the investigation. The detectives learned that she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The detectives also asked Margaret about her movements on the night of the murder. She claimed she was in her room with old episodes of gunsmoke and didn't hear anything unusual. However, her inconsistent responses and the disturbing content of the letters made the detectives suspicious. Forensic experts analyzed the knife used in the murder and found traces of Margaret's fingerprints. This evidence, combined with the letters and her erratic behavior, made her a strong suspect. The detectives also found that Margaret had a motive: her sexual obsession for Larry and her desire to keep control over Lauren and her grandson. Margaret's reactions during the interrogation ranged from calm to agitated. She insisted that she loved Larry and would never hurt him, but her responses were often confusing and contradictory. The detectives noted her unstable behavior and continued to press her for details. The investigation revealed that Margaret's mental health issues and obsession with Larry had created a dangerous situation. The combination of her stopping her medication and her irrational beliefs about Larry pointed to a possible motive for the murder. As the police gathered more evidence, they realized they needed to consider all angles. Margaret's mental state and her history of erratic behavior were crucial pieces of the puzzle. The detectives knew they had to be thorough in their investigation to ensure they uncovered the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. On Valentine's Day 2015, the Rochester police made a breakthrough in the case. After collecting and analyzing all the evidence, they identified Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law, as the murderer. Margaret, who lived with the Harrison family, had a long history of mental health issues. Her obsession with Larry and her deteriorating mental state had led to a tragic outcome. The police pieced together what happened on the night of the murder. Margaret had confronted Larry in the kitchen, cruelly demanding that he have sex with her. When Larry loudly refused, Margaret's obsession turned violent. She grabbed a kitchen knife and, in a fit of rage, stabbed Larry multiple times. The attack was frenzied, and Larry had tried to defend himself, but he couldn't escape. Detectives Gustafson and Brown, along with a team of officers, went to the Harrison home to arrest Margaret. It was early in the morning, around 6:00 a.m., when they arrived. Margaret was in her room, and when the police informed her of the charges, she initially appeared confused and then became hysterical. She kept screaming this Valentine's Day, "I give my heart to you, Larry," and claimed that Larry's death was an accident caused by her tardive dyskinesia, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The arrest shocked the entire Harrison family. Lauren and her son were devastated. They couldn't believe that Margaret, their mother and grandmother, could commit such a horrible act. The neighbors, who had always seen Margaret as a frail and eccentric old lady, were equally stunned. The community was in disbelief as news of the arrest spread. Lauren and her son struggled to come to terms with the revelation. They were torn between their grief for Larry and their disbelief about Margaret's actions. The arrest brought some closure to the case, but left the family in deep emotional turmoil. The police took Margaret into custody, and she was booked at the local jail. During the booking process, Margaret remained erratic and often incoherent. The police ensured that she received medical attention for her mental health issues, but her legal troubles were just beginning. The community, still reeling from Larry's murder, had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the police had found the killer, while others were saddened by the tragic circumstances that led to the crime. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the arrest extensively, adding to the public's shock and sorrow. The arrest of Margaret Smith marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had successfully identified and apprehended the murderer, but the road to justice was far from over. The next step would be the trial, where the full extent of Margaret's actions and the impact on the Harrison family would be revealed. Margaret Smith's trial began on April 20, 2016, at the Olmsted County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, including Larry Harrison's family and friends. The trial attracted significant media attention, with local news outlets like the Rochester Post-Bulletin providing daily updates. The prosecutor, David Benedictus, 45, was known for his tough approach. He argued that Margaret's obsession with Larry and her decision to stop taking her medication led to the brutal murder. Benedictus presented the love letters as evidence of Margaret's unhealthy fixation and called on forensic experts to explain how the fingerprints on the knife matched Margaret's. Margaret's defense attorney, Linda Lou Green, 50, had a reputation for taking on challenging cases. She argued that Margaret's mental health issues and the side effects of her medication, including tardive dyskinesia, played a significant role in the incident. Green tried to convince the jury that the murder was not premeditated but a tragic accident. Throughout the trial, Larry's family was visibly emotional. Lauren Harrison and her son attended every day, struggling to process the loss of Larry and the betrayal by Margaret. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as each side presented its case. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On May 5, 2016, they found Margaret Smith guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, considering her mental health issues but also acknowledging the severity of her crime. The verdict brought a sense of closure, but also a deep sadness for Larry's family. Lauren expressed relief that justice had been served, but was heartbroken over the loss of her husband and the actions of her mother. The community had mixed reactions, with some feeling the sentence was fair while others thought it was too lenient or too harsh. Margaret's reaction to the verdict was one of shock. She maintained that she never meant to kill Larry and claimed the murder was an accident. Her erratic behavior continued, and she was transferred to a facility where she could receive mental health treatment while serving her sentence. The prosecution's argument was strong, highlighting Margaret's obsession and the premeditated nature of the murder. David Benedictus was praised for his thorough work in securing the conviction. On the other hand, Linda Lou Green's defense was seen as compassionate but ultimately unconvincing to the jury. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a painful chapter for the Harrison family. Friends and neighbors offered their support, trying to help Lauren and her son move forward. The verdict and sentencing were widely covered by the media, bringing attention to the complexities of mental health in criminal cases. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder and the trial of Margaret Smith would be felt in Rochester for years to come. The community, while relieved that justice was served, remained deeply affected by the tragic events that unfolded in February 2015. After Margaret Smith's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to a new normal for the Harrison family and those involved in the case. For Lauren Harrison and her son, the aftermath of Larry's murder was a difficult journey of grief and healing. They received support from friends, neighbors, and the community who rallied around them during this challenging time. Lauren decided to move out of the house where the tragic event occurred. With the help of close friends and local volunteers, she found a new home in a quieter neighborhood of Rochester. She wanted to create a fresh start for herself and her son, away from the painful memories of their old house. In the months following the trial, Lauren focused on rebuilding her life. She returned to work at the Mayo Clinic, where she received support from colleagues and patients alike. Lauren's strength and resilience inspired many in the community who admired her courage in the face of adversity. Larry's colleagues at the local Applebee's where he worked also honored his memory. They organized the memorial service in March 2015, inviting friends, customers, and community members to celebrate Larry's life. The event featured heartfelt speeches, music, and a slideshow of photos showcasing Larry's dedication to his work and his love for his family. Meanwhile, Margaret Smith began serving her sentence at a state correctional facility. She received ongoing mental health treatment to manage her condition and the effects of her medication. Despite her tepid attempts to ask forgiveness for what she did, Margaret eventually succumbed to COVID-19 in May of 2021 and was buried without a gravestone in the jailhouse cemetery. The Rochester community, though deeply affected by the events of February 2015, came together to support each other. Local organizations offered counseling services and support groups for those affected by violent crimes. The media continued to follow the aftermath of the case, highlighting the importance of mental health awareness and support for families dealing with loss. As time passed, Lauren Harrison and her son found ways to remember Larry's kindness and generosity. They visited his favorite places in Rochester and shared memories with friends and family. While the pain of losing Larry would always be with them, they focused on honoring his legacy and finding hope in the future. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder resonated throughout Rochester, reminding everyone of the fragility of life and the importance of community support. The Harrison family's journey through grief and healing served as a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. Olivia Watson, a vibrant 29-year-old, was a woman driven by her insatiable wanderlust. Hailing from the constraining conservative town of Bentonville, Arkansas, known only for being the headquarters of Walmart, she defied the confines of her small-town origins, embracing a life of adventure and exploration. As one of the pioneers in the world of travel blogging, Olivia's name resonated across the internet, inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. Despite her humble beginnings, Olivia possessed an indomitable spirit and an unwavering love for the unknown. Her passion for travel was matched only by her deep-rooted compassion for others. Whether it was lending a helping hand to a fellow traveler or championing a charitable cause, Olivia's altruism knew no bounds. In the summer of 2004, Olivia's star was on the rise. She was on the cusp of literary success, with her debut novel, The Hungry Ghosts, poised to captivate readers worldwide. The book, a poignant tale blending Chinese folklore with the story of the disintegration of famous video game characters Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man's marriage, had garnered the attention of literary critics and even caught the eye of Oprah Winfrey herself, who was rumored to be considering it for her esteemed book club. As the sun-drenched days of July enveloped Turks and Caicos, Olivia found solace in the island's pristine beaches and azure waters. She reveled in the vibrant culture and soaked up the local flavors, immersing herself in the tapestry of this idyllic paradise. Little did she know that her time in this tropical haven would be tragically cut short. The tranquility of the turquoise waters surrounding the idyllic Turks and Caicos Islands was shattered on a sweltering afternoon in July 2004. Patty Brecht, a tourist from West Islip, New York, was innocently strolling along the pristine beach when she stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Half buried in the sand, she discovered the severed head of Olivia Watson, a vibrant 29-year-old travel blogger from Bentonville, Arkansas, whose love for adventure and exploration had brought her to this tropical paradise. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves far beyond the tight-knit community of the travel blogging world. As the investigation unfolded, authorities would scour the crime scene for any clues that could shed light on Olivia's untimely demise. The turquoise waters, once a symbol of serenity, now held a dark secret. The island chain, known for its pristine beauty and luxurious resorts, became a hotbed of media attention. News outlets descended upon Turks and Caicos, hungry for the latest updates on the investigation. Journalists set up camp near the crime scene, their cameras capturing the somber atmosphere that had engulfed the once tranquil paradise. Rumors and speculations ran rampant, fueled by the media coverage. The local community, usually tight-knit and welcoming, became wary of outsiders as suspicion hung in the air. Tourists, who had once flocked to the islands for their picturesque beaches and vibrant culture, now hesitated, unsure of the safety of this once beloved destination. Turks and Caicos, once a paradise for many, had become a haunting reminder of the brutality that shattered its tranquility. The turquoise waters, once a symbol of beauty, now held a dark secret that refused to be forgotten. On that fateful afternoon in July 2004, the pristine beaches of Turks and Caicos transformed into a chilling crime scene. Detectives Michael Sanchez and Tamar Rodriguez, seasoned investigators from the local police force, arrived swiftly to confront the grim reality that awaited them. The turquoise waters, once a symbol of tranquility, now mirrored the horror that had unfolded. The sand, usually soft and inviting, was stained crimson, bearing witness to the violence that had taken place. The scene resembled something out of a crime drama, a shocking tableau that would haunt the island's residents for years to come. The head of Olivia Watson, the vibrant and adventurous travel blogger, was found half buried in the sand, roughly severed. The sheer brutality of the crime hinted at a motive fueled by rage, leaving the detectives puzzled and the community in shock. The absence of any immediate clues regarding the cause of death or location of the rest of her body only deepened the mystery surrounding this heinous act. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives meticulously combed through every inch of the crime scene. They painstakingly collected samples of the stained sand, preserving the evidence that would later be subjected to rigorous forensic analysis. The sand, once a symbol of leisure and relaxation, now held the key to unraveling the truth behind Olivia's tragic demise. Local residents were gripped with fear and apprehension, their once idyllic paradise transformed into a nightmare. The murder cast a dark shadow over the island, shattering the sense of security that had once prevailed. Tourists, who had flocked to Turks and Caicos for its pristine beauty, now found themselves questioning their decision to visit this once tranquil destination. As the investigation continued, the detectives delved into Olivia's life, seeking any possible leads that could shed light on her untimely demise. They meticulously reviewed her travel blog, scouring her posts for any hints or clues that could point them in the right direction. The blog, once a testament to Olivia's adventurous spirit, now served as a haunting reminder of a life cut short. Jason Reyes, a 30-year-old software engineer, was the devoted boyfriend of Olivia Watson, the vibrant travel blogger whose tragic death shocked the idyllic island chain of Turks and Caicos in July 2004. Described as charming and charismatic, Jason had won the hearts of many with his affable personality. However, behind his charming exterior lay a darker side that friends of the couple had started to notice. According to those close to them, Jason's behavior had taken a turn for the worse in recent months. While he appeared to be deeply in love with Olivia, his possessive and controlling tendencies had become increasingly apparent. Friends of the couple revealed that Jason had been involved in multiple affairs with other women, despite his supposed commitment to Olivia. The couple's friends were taken aback by the stark contrast between Jason's public persona and his private actions. They recalled instances where he would shower Olivia with gifts and affection, only to later display jealousy and anger when she interacted with other people, particularly men. These incidents had caused tension within their relationship, and Olivia's friends had expressed concern about the toxic dynamic that was developing. In addition to his troubled relationship with Olivia, Jason had also been facing difficulties at work. Colleagues at the software engineering firm where he was employed described him as highly intelligent but increasingly isolated and moody. Some even mentioned that he had been reprimanded by his superiors for missing deadlines and exhibiting erratic behavior. As news of Olivia's tragic death spread, the media began to dig deeper into the couple's relationship. Rumors of Jason's infidelity and controlling behavior started to circulate, capturing the attention of the public. The local newspaper, the Turks and Caicos Daily, ran a front-page article detailing the couple's tumultuous relationship, citing anonymous sources close to the investigation. Luana Parker, 34, a receptionist at Walmart headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, was known for her outgoing and vivacious personality. She had been Olivia Watson's loyal best friend for years, always by her side through thick and thin. Their bond was unbreakable, or so it seemed. During their trip to Turks and Caicos in July 2004, Luana's protective nature was on full display. She made sure Olivia was safe at all times, ensuring they followed proper safety protocols and avoided any risky situations. Luana's dedication to her friend was unwavering, but little did Olivia know that Luana held a secret that could shatter their friendship forever. Luana had been secretly involved in a passionate love affair with Jason Reyes, Olivia's boyfriend. It was a relationship fueled by desire and forbidden love, hidden behind closed doors. Luana's heart yearned for Jason, the man who charmed her with his charismatic personality. She couldn't resist his allure, even though she knew it was wrong. As the days in paradise unfolded, Luana found herself torn between her loyalty to Olivia and her intense love for Jason. She struggled to keep her emotions in check, constantly battling the guilt that consumed her. The weight of her secret became unbearable, threatening to destroy the very foundation of their friendship. In the aftermath of Olivia's death, Luana found herself caught in a web of lies and deceit. She knew she had to come clean about her affair with Jason, but the fear of losing everything held her back. She couldn't bear the thought of losing both Olivia and Jason, the two people who had become her whole world. As the investigation into Olivia's murder intensified, the truth began to unravel. Luana's secret was exposed, and the media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the pressure. The world watched as this small island paradise became the backdrop for a scandal that would forever change the lives of those involved. In the midst of the investigation into Olivia Watson's brutal murder, a crucial piece of evidence emerged that sent shockwaves through the media. It was revealed that Olivia had participated in a local tradition known as Island Love, a ritual where participants, locals and tourists alike, were randomly paired for sex. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the already perplexing case. Olivia's Island Love partner was none other than Joey Clacker, a 45-year-old married man from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Joey, a mild-mannered accountant by day, had been visiting the Turks and Caicos Islands with his wife and 5 children. The news of his involvement in this scandalous affair sent shockwaves through his community back home. The Island Love tradition, while considered a titillating and exciting adventure for many, had now become a focal point in the investigation. Detectives Michael Sanchez and Tamara Rodriguez meticulously combed through the details, trying to determine if this encounter held any significance in Olivia's murder. As the investigation unfolded, the media frenzy surrounding Olivia's murder intensified. News outlets from Bentonville, Arkansas to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and beyond were captivated by the shocking turn of events. Headlines from the New York Post screamed about the Island Love tragedy, with journalists speculating about the potential motives and hidden secrets behind Olivia and Joey's ill-fated encounter. Friends and family of Olivia were left bewildered by this unexpected twist. How could their vibrant and adventurous Olivia, known for her love of travel and exploration, find herself entangled in such a sordid affair? The once idyllic paradise of Turks and Caicos had now become a hotbed of speculation and intrigue. In the picturesque setting of Turks and Caicos in July 2004, a scandalous affair unfolded, shattering the tranquility of this idyllic island chain. Joey Clacker, a married man and father of 5 from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, found himself entangled in a web of desire and obsession with Olivia Watson, the vibrant travel blogger whose life was tragically cut short. Joey, known for his adventurous spirit and magnetic personality, willingly participated in the local tradition known as Island Love. This tradition, which paired participants for a one night of sex, brought Joey and Olivia together in a passionate encounter. Their connection was intense, but short-lived, as Olivia's independent spirit and commitment to her career and boyfriend prevented any further romantic involvement. However, the flame of Joey's infatuation continued to burn. Consumed by jealousy and resentment towards anyone who stood in his way, Joey's obsession with Olivia took a dark turn. Friends close to the couple revealed that Joey's feelings for Olivia grew into an unhealthy fixation, leading him down a dangerous path. The facade of friendship between Joey and Olivia crumbled as his true intentions were exposed. Friends and acquaintances were shocked to discover that Joey, a seemingly devoted family man, harbored a secret desire to win Olivia back. His actions became increasingly erratic as he desperately sought to rekindle their connection. As authorities delved deeper into the investigation surrounding Olivia's murder, they discovered the extent of Joey's obsession. The evidence pointed to a motive driven by jealousy and a desperate desire to possess Olivia, even if it meant resorting to violence. The shocking murder case that unfolded on the idyllic island chain of Turks and Caicos in July 2004 took a startling turn. As the investigation progressed, a web of love, lies, and betrayal begins to unravel, revealing a sinister plot that ended in the tragic death of Olivia Watson, a vibrant travel blogger. New evidence emerged, shedding light on the motive behind Olivia's brutal murder. It was none other than Luana Parker, Olivia's seemingly loyal best friend, who masterminded the heinous crime. Luana's jealousy and resentment towards Olivia's relationship with Jason Reyes, Olivia's devoted boyfriend and Luana's lover, drove her to take drastic measures to eliminate her perceived rival. Driven by envy and insecurity, Luana hatched a plan to ensure Jason's unwavering devotion to her and to remove any threat to their relationship. The revelation of Olivia's participation in the local tradition of Island Love, where participants were randomly paired for a sex, became the catalyst for Luana's sinister plot. Jason, upon discovering Olivia's involvement in Island Love, was consumed by a mix of emotions. His love for Olivia and his anger at being betrayed pushed him to join Luana in the murder plot. Together, they cornered Olivia on a secluded beach, wielding coconuts as their deadly weapons, and beat her to death and that dismembering her body afterwards, leaving her body to the waves but keeping her head in the sand. The investigation has uncovered a series of events that paint a chilling picture of the days leading up to the murder. Friends of the couple revealed that Jason, known for his charming and charismatic personality, had a darker side. He became increasingly possessive and controlling in his relationship with Olivia, despite engaging in multiple affairs with other women. Despite their arrest, the tranquility of Turks and Caicos has been forever shattered, and the repercussions of this crime will be felt for years to come. The trial that unfolded in the wake of Olivia Watson's brutal murder in Turks and Caicos in July 2004 was a harrowing ordeal for her grieving family and the tight-knit island community. The courtroom was filled with tension as prosecutor Diana Lachlan-Brose meticulously presented the evidence, painting a vivid picture of deceit and violence that had shattered the tranquility of this idyllic paradise. The defense attorney fought desperately to create doubt, but the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The jury listened intently as witness after witness took the stand, recounting the events that led to Olivia's tragic demise. The testimony of Patty Brecht, the beachcomber who stumbled upon Olivia's half-buried body, sent shivers down the spines of those in the courtroom. The sight of Olivia's bloody, severed head, stained crimson by the violence inflicted upon her, was etched in the memories of all who bore witness. The prosecution presented a crucial piece of evidence: Olivia's participation in a local tradition called Island Love. This tradition, as it turned out, involved random pairings for one night of sex. Olivia's assigned partner was Joey Clacker, a married man from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The revelation of this affair added a layer of complexity to the case, further entangling the lives of those involved. As the trial progressed, the motive behind the murder began to unravel. It was revealed that Olivia's boyfriend, Jason Reyes, had discovered her involvement in Island Love and had become consumed by jealousy. Driven by a toxic combination of envy and insecurity, Jason enlisted the help of his secret lover and Olivia's best friend, Luana Parker, to carry out the heinous act. The courtroom was filled with gasps as the details of the twisted murder plot were laid bare. Jason and Luana had cornered Olivia on a secluded beach, armed with coconuts, and beat her to death, later dismembering her body. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving a lasting scar on the once tranquil island. Finally, after weeks of emotional testimony and legal arguments, the jury reached a verdict. Both Jason and Luana were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Olivia's family, though finding a measure of solace in the outcome, knew that their lives would never be the same again. As the trial came to a close, the idyllic paradise of Turks and Caicos was forever tainted by the memory of this brutal crime. The island, known for its turquoise waters and pristine beaches, would now also be associated with the darkness that had unfolded within its borders. In the aftermath of the brutal murder that shook the idyllic island paradise of Turks and Caicos in July of 2004, the community slowly began the process of healing. For Olivia's family, the pain of their loss was immeasurable. They sought solace in the memories of their vibrant and adventurous daughter, cherishing the moments they had shared. Though devastated, they found strength in the support of their community and the unwavering dedication of the detectives who fought for justice. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, but the echoes of Olivia's murder would forever linger in the collective memory of Turks and Caicos. The island slowly regained its sense of tranquility, but the scars left by the tragedy would never fully fade. Detectives Sanchez and Rodriguez, forever changed by their involvement in the case, continued their fight for justice in other investigations. Their tireless dedication to upholding the law and protecting their community remained unwavering. In the end, Olivia's story serves as a somber reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even in the most picturesque of places, darkness can take hold. The idyllic island paradise of Turks and Caicos may have been marred by this brutal crime, but the community's resilience and determination to move forward ensured that hope would prevail. Julie Lewis was 18 years old. She lived in Payette, Idaho, a small town known for its friendly people and beautiful landscapes. Julie was in her senior year of high school and was known for her beauty and intelligence. She dreamed of going to college and starting a new life away from the troubles she faced at home. Julie's life had been tough. Her mother died of cancer when Julie was only 14. This loss left a big hole in her life. Her father, Tony Lewis, was a police officer who worked long hours. Julie often felt lonely and started seeking the company of older men who could offer her the stability and comfort she missed. Some people thought Julie was manipulative, using her looks and charm to get what she wanted. Others believed she was just trying to survive in a world that had not been kind to her. In school, Julie was an honor roll student. Her friends described her as ambitious and determined, always talking about her plans for the future. She wanted to study business at the University of Idaho and one day own her own company. Julie's teachers saw her potential and often praised her hard work and dedication. In the days leading up to her death, Julie was busy preparing for her high school graduation. She bought a new dress for the occasion and was excited about the graduation ceremony. She talked to her friends about their plans for the summer. They planned to visit the local mall, go to the movies, and spend time at the nearby Snake River. Julie also had a part-time job at a local diner, where she saved up money for college. She was well-liked by her coworkers and customers for her friendly and outgoing personality. Despite her troubles, Julie tried to stay positive. She had a close-knit group of friends who supported her. They often hung out at local spots like the Payette Skate Park and the community swimming pool. Julie was also involved in her school's drama club, where she enjoyed acting and working behind the scenes. Julie's dreams were big, but her life was cut short. She had plans and ambitions, but she never got the chance to see them through. Her death shocked the small town of Payette, leaving everyone wondering what could have been. On the morning of June 5, 2012, Tony Lewis came home after his night shift as a police officer. Comey expected to find his daughter Julie still asleep. Instead, he found a horrifying scene. Julie's lifeless body was on the floor of her bedroom. The room was in disarray, with items scattered everywhere. Julie had been brutally attacked. She was bludgeoned with a rock from outside their home and then strangled with a belt. Tony was shocked and devastated. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Fighting through his grief and panic, Tony called 911 to report the crime. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher what had happened. Despite his training and experience as a police officer, nothing could have prepared him for this. The news of Julie's murder spread quickly through the small town of Payette. Payette hadn't seen a murder in over 20 years, and the community was in shock. Julie was well known and liked by many. Her death was a terrible blow to the town. When the first responders arrived, they found Tommy outside, distraught and in tears. The sight inside Julie's room was gruesome. Blood was spattered on the walls, and the signs of a struggle were clear. Julie's face was bruised, and there were ulcers around her neck from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used in the attack lay nearby, covered in blood. The paramedics pronounced Julie dead at the scene. Tony could only watch in despair as they did their job. He was overwhelmed with grief, unable to comprehend how someone could do this to his daughter. Neighbors started to gather outside the Lewis home, drawn by the flashing lights of the police cars and ambulances. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand what had happened. Reporters from local news outlets soon arrived, their cameras and microphones capturing the tragic scene. They interviewed some of the neighbors, who spoke of their shock and sadness. Julie's friends and classmates were devastated by the news. Many of them had seen her just the day before at school, laughing and talking about their future plans. Now those plans would never come true. The school counselors were brought in to help the students cope with their grief. The entire town mourned the loss of a bright, young life taken too soon. The police arrived quickly at the Lewis home on the morning of June 5, 2012. Leading the investigation was Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts, a seasoned investigator known for her thoroughness and dedication. She had solved many tough cases in her career and was determined to find justice for Julie. The crime scene was horrific. Julie's bedroom was in chaos, with items strewn everywhere. Blood spattered the walls and signs of a violent struggle were evident. Julie's body lay on the floor, her face bruised and neck, marked from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used to bludgeon her lay nearby, covered in blood. Detective Roberts and her team began their meticulous work. Detective Roberts, along with Officer Olson Benson, a local officer with 15 years on the force, started by securing the area to prevent contamination of evidence. They took photos of the entire scene, capturing every detail. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and collected fingerprints from various surfaces. The investigators also bagged the rock and belt as key pieces of evidence. Detective Roberts noticed several things right away. The window in Julie's room was slightly open, suggesting someone might have entered or exited through it. There were scratches on the windowsill, possibly from the killer climbing in or out. Outside, footprints in the garden soil indicated someone had recently been there. The team interviewed Tony Lewis, who was still in shock. He recounted finding Julie and calling 911. His grief was palpable, and Detective Roberts felt his pain as a father. Despite his emotional state, Tony provided all the information he could, hoping it would help catch his daughter's killer. The local news outlets, including the Payette Times, covered the story extensively. Reporters interviewed residents and followed every development closely. The town was gripped by fear and sadness, unable to believe such a brutal crime could happen in their peaceful community. As the investigation continued, Detective Roberts and her team worked tirelessly. They analyzed the evidence collected, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the murderer. They checked for any connections Julie might have had with known criminals and looked into her recent activities. The community's support for the police was strong. People brought food and coffee to the officers working long hours. Local businesses put up posters offering rewards for information leading to the arrest of Julie's killer. The town of Payette, once quiet and serene, now united in their quest for justice. The first suspect the police investigated was Harold Henderson. Harold, aged 70, was a retired used car salesman who lived in Payette. He was well known in the town for his flashy personality and competitive nature. Despite his age, Harold had a reputation for being charming and wealthy, making him popular in the local social scene. He was a widower, living alone in a large house filled with memorabilia from his younger days. Harold's connection to Julie Lewis came to light quickly. It was discovered that he had been romantically involved with Julie. Some residents of Payette knew about their relationship and whispered about the odd pairing. Harold's interest in Julie raised eyebrows, but in a small town, people often keep secrets. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Harold in for questioning on June 6, 2012. They wanted to understand the nature of his relationship with Julie and determine if he had a motive for her murder. Harold arrived at the police station dressed neatly, his demeanor calm but slightly defensive. During the interrogation, Harold admitted to his relationship with Julie but denied any involvement in her death. He claimed they had a consensual sexual relationship, started only after she turned 18, and that he cared deeply for her. However, Harold's competitive streak, especially with his twin brother Alan, suggested a possible motive. Harold and Alan had a long history of rivalry, and both had been vying for Julie's attention. Harold's calm and confident demeanor began to waver as Detective Roberts pressed him on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Harold stated he was at home, watching a rerun of NCIS on CBS. He insisted he had no reason to harm Julie and was shocked by her death. However, his answers were vague. and he couldn't provide a solid alibi. The police also investigated Harold's financial records. They found that he had been giving Julie money regularly, which could have been a source of tension if he discovered she was manipulating him. Harold's phone record showed multiple calls and messages to Julie in the days leading up to her death, indicating frequent communication. Despite his denials, the police felt Harold had the motive and opportunity to commit the crime. His history of competitiveness with Alan and his romantic involvement with Julie painted a troubling picture. The investigators kept a close eye on Harold, looking for any inconsistencies in his story and waiting for any evidence that might link him directly to the murder. As the investigation continued, Harold remained a prime suspect. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature, coupled with his involvement with Julie, made him a central figure in the case. The town of Payette watched closely as the police worked to uncover the truth behind Julie's tragic death. The second suspect in the investigation was Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother. Alan, also 70 years old, was a retired high school history teacher. Known for his intellect and passion for teaching, Alan was respected and well-liked in Payette. He had a reputation for being level-headed and scholarly, a stark contrast to his more flamboyant brother. Alan had never married and was often seen as a bachelor who enjoyed his solitude. He spent much of his time reading and participating in community events. Despite his age, Alan had a magnetic personality that attracted people of all ages. He was particularly fond of attending local book clubs and giving lectures at the town library. The police discovered that Alan, like his brother, had also been romantically involved with Julie Lewis. This revelation shocked many in the town, as Alan was viewed as a more reserved and dignified figure. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Alan in for questioning on June 7, 2012, to understand his relationship with Julie and his potential motives. Alan arrived at the police station looking composed, dressed in a tweed jacket that hinted at his scholarly background. During the interrogation, he admitted to his relationship with Julie, but insisted it was platonic. He explained that he enjoyed her company and found her bright and ambitious. Alan's affection for Julie was evident, but he denied any romantic involvement. Detective Roberts pressed Alan about his whereabouts on the night of Julie's murder. Alan stated he was at home, working on a lecture for the local historical society. He mentioned reading a book about the Civil War, a topic he was passionate about. However, his alibi was weak, as he lived alone and had no witnesses to confirm his story. Alan's demeanor during the interrogation was calm but saddened. He expressed disbelief that Julie could be dead. He cooperated fully with the police, providing them with his phone records and access to his home. The investigators found nothing suspicious at his residence, but they continued to scrutinize his interactions with Julie. The police also interviewed people who knew Alan. His colleagues and former students spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated teacher who cared deeply about education. Despite his calm exterior, the possibility of betrayal by Julie could have triggered a strong emotional response. As the investigation progressed, Alan remained a key suspect. His scholarly nature and apparent innocence contrasted sharply with the dark motives uncovered. The police continued to explore every lead, determined to uncover the truth behind Julie's murder and the Henderson brothers' involvement. The third suspect in Julie Lewis' murder investigation was her father, Tony Lewis. Tony, 45, was a police officer in Payette, Idaho. Known for his protective nature, Tony was a well-liked figure in the community. He had become close to the Henderson brothers over the years, often acting as a mediator between the two. Tony's connection to Julie was evident, as he was her father and lived next door to Alan Henderson. The police had to consider every possibility, even the uncomfortable one that Tony might be involved. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson decided to question Tony on June 8, 2012. Tony was still reeling from the shock of finding his daughter's body. When he arrived at the police station, he looked tired and grief-stricken. During the interrogation, Tony recounted his actions on the night of the murder. He had been working a night shift, which he often did to provide for Julie after the death of her mother. Tony insisted he had no reason to harm his daughter and was devastated by her death. Detective Roberts asked Tony about his relationship with the Henderson brothers. Tony admitted he knew about their interest in Julie and had tried to keep the peace between them. He expressed his frustration over their rivalry, which had caused tension in the neighborhood. Despite this, Tony was adamant that he had no involvement in the crime. The police looked into Tony's background and found no history of violence or misconduct. His colleagues at the police department spoke highly of him. describing him as a dedicated officer and loving father. However, the investigators had to consider the possibility that Tony's protective instincts might have driven him to a breaking point. Tony provided his phone records and cooperated fully with the investigation. The record showed he had been on duty at the time of the murder, but the police needed to verify this alibi thoroughly. They checked surveillance footage from the police station and confirmed Tony's presence there during the critical hours. The police also interviewed neighbors and friends of Tony. Most described him as a caring father who was deeply affected by his wife's death and determined to give Julie a better life. Some, however, mentioned that Tony had become more stressed and irritable in recent months, possibly due to the pressure of raising a teenager alone. Despite Tony's grief and cooperation, the police had to keep all possibilities open. His close proximity to the crime scene and his protective nature were significant factors in the investigation. Detective Roberts and her team continued to examine every piece of evidence, knowing that solving the case required looking at every angle, no matter how painful. As the investigation unfolded, Tony remained under scrutiny. The small town of Payette watched closely, hoping for answers and justice for Julie. The police were determined to find the truth, and Tony's involvement, if any, would be uncovered through their relentless efforts. On June 10, 2012, around 3:00 p.m., new evidence came to light. The weather was warm and sunny, typical for Payette in early summer. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts received a call from a local hiker who had found something unusual near the Snake River. He had been walking his dog when he noticed a small bag hidden under some rocks. Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson rushed to the scene. They found a small black bag containing a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. The items were immediately taken into evidence. The police believed these items could be crucial in solving Julie's murder. Back at the station, the forensic team examined the evidence. The blood on the shirt matched Julie's. This was a significant breakthrough. The gloves were tested for fingerprints, and the results came back with a match to Harold Henderson. This finding shifted the focus back to Harold, who had previously denied being near the crime scene. Detective Roberts and her team re-examined Harold's alibi. They discovered inconsistencies in his story. Further analysis of his phone records showed he had been near Julie's house at the time of the murder, contradicting his claim of being at home watching TV. The new evidence prompted the police to search Harold's home again. This time, they found a hidden compartment in his garage with several items that raised suspicion, including a second pair of gloves and a belt similar to the one used to strangle Julie. These discoveries painted a clearer picture of Harold's involvement. As the investigation deepened, the police interviewed more witnesses. They found out that Harold had been seen arguing with Julie the day before her death. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, reported hearing raised voices and seeing Harold leave Julie's house looking angry. With the new evidence, Detective Roberts felt confident they were closing in on the truth. The police brought Harold in for another round of questioning. This time, his demeanor was less confident. Confronted with the evidence, Harold became defensive and struggled to maintain his earlier calmness. The forensic team continued to analyze the evidence, looking for any additional clues. They used advanced techniques like DNA testing and fiber analysis to ensure nothing was overlooked. The detailed investigation paid off, as more links between Harold and the crime were uncovered. By the end of the week, the police were confident they had enough evidence to make an arrest. The discovery of the bag near the Snake River had been the breakthrough they needed. The town of Payette waited anxiously for justice to be served. On June 12, 2012, the police were ready to make an arrest. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts had pieced together the evidence pointing to Harold Henderson as the murderer. Harold, 70, was a retired used car salesman known for his flamboyant personality and competitive nature. His charm and wealth made him a popular figure in Payette, but his rivalry with his twin brother Alan and romantic involvement with Julie Lewis revealed a darker side. Harold had been competing with Alan for Julie's affection. He had given Julie money regularly and felt betrayed when he discovered her plan to blackmail him and Alan. On the night of June 4, Harold confronted Julie at her home. The argument turned violent, leading Harold to bludgeon her with a rock he found outside and strangle her with a belt. Driven by anger and betrayal, Harold committed the brutal murder. Detective Roberts had discovered inconsistencies in Harold's alibi and found crucial evidence, like the blood-stained shirt and gloves, linking him to the crime. The DNA and fingerprints on the gloves match Harold's, and the blood on the shirt was Julie's. Surveillance footage also placed Harold near Julie's house at the time of the murder. On the morning of June 12, Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson went to Harold's house to arrest him. They arrived at 9:00 a.m., and Harold was at home. When they told him he was under arrest for Julie's murder, Harold looked shocked but didn't resist. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. At the station, Harold was formally charged with murder. His reaction was one of disbelief and anger. He insisted he was innocent, claiming the evidence was planted. Despite his protests, the overwhelming evidence convinced the police of his guilt. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, was informed about the arrest. He was devastated but relieved that the police had found the person responsible for his daughter's death. The town of Payette, which had been closely following the investigation, felt a mix of shock and relief. They couldn't believe someone they knew so well could commit such a heinous crime. As Harold was taken into custody, the town hoped for justice for Julie. Her friends and family gathered to support each other, remembering Julie for her beauty, intelligence, and dreams of a better future. The arrest brought some closure, but the pain of losing Julie would remain with them forever. The evidence against Harold was strong, and the police were confident they had the right person. The case now moved to the courts, where Harold would face trial for his actions. The community waited anxiously for the trial, hoping for a verdict that would bring justice for Julie. Harold Henderson's trial began on July 15, 2012, in Payette County Court. The courtroom was filled with Julie Lewis' family and local residents eager to see justice served. The case received extensive coverage from local news outlets, including the Payette Times and KTVB Channel 7, which kept the community updated on the trial's progress. The prosecutor, Emily Hackle Matchwork, 38, was known for her strong courtroom presence and dedication to seeking justice. Hackle Matchwork argued that Harold Henderson was guilty of brutally murdering Julie Lewis. She presented a clear case, showing evidence such as the blood-stained shirt and gloves found near the Snake River, Harold's fingerprints on the murder weapon, and surveillance footage placing him at Julie's house on the night of the crime. Hackle Matchwork described the crime as an act of rage and betrayal, emphasizing how Harold's rivalry with his twin brother and his manipulative behavior towards Julie led to her tragic death. The defense attorney, Drew Nils, 45, was a respected lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. Nils argued that the evidence against Harold was circumstantial and that his client was being falsely accused. He suggested that Harold's emotional state and previous arguments with Julie did not prove guilt. Mills attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, arguing that it was possible someone else could have committed the murder. Julie's family attended the trial every day. Her father, Tony Lewis, appeared exhausted but resolute. He was seen comforting Julie's friends and family, who were deeply affected by the trial. The emotional weight of the case was evident as testimonies about Julie's life and dreams were presented in court. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on August 5, 2012. Harold Henderson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow from the courtroom. Julie's family, while devastated by her loss, felt the sense of justice had been achieved. Sentencing took place on August 12, 2012. Harold was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, Honorable David Thompson, stated that the crime was particularly heinous due to its brutality and the betrayal involved. The sentence was seen by many as a fitting punishment for the crime. The trial's conclusion had a profound impact on the community. Payette, a town that had not seen such a violent crime in years, was left to heal. Julie's friends and family continued to honor her memory, focusing on her dreams and aspirations rather than the tragic end of her life. The case served as a stark reminder of the impact of violence and the importance of justice in a close-knit community. After Harold Henderson's trial and sentencing, life in Payette, Idaho, began to slowly return to normal. The town had been deeply affected by Julie Lewis' murder and the dramatic court case that followed. Payette, known for its close-knit community and small-town charm, was shaken by the violence and the betrayal that came to light. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, continued to cope with the loss of his daughter. He took a leave of absence from his job as a police officer to focus on his grief and to support Julie's memory. Tony began speaking at local schools about the importance of communication and the dangers of manipulation, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. His efforts were met with support from the community, who admired his strength and resilience. Harold Henderson's life took a dramatic turn after his conviction. He was transferred to the Idaho State Penitentiary, where he began serving his life sentence. Harold's high-profile case and the nature of his crime made him a notable inmate, but he kept a low profile in prison. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature were replaced by a more subdued and reflective demeanor. The prison system provided Harold with counseling, but it did little to ease the weight of his actions. Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother, also had to deal with the aftermath. Though he was cleared of any involvement in Julie's murder, the case had taken a toll on him emotionally. Alan withdrew from the social scene and focused on personal reflection. He continued to live in Payette, where he was known for his quiet and reserved nature. The community remained supportive of Alan, understanding that he had been a victim of his brother's actions as much as Julie's family had been. As time passed, Payette slowly moved forward. The town's recovery was marked by a sense of healing and unity, with residents coming together to support one another. The memory of Julie Lewis lived on through the scholarship and charity events, reminding everyone of her life and the impact of her tragic death. Derek Orville, 45, was a well-known and successful realtor from Mankato, Minnesota, a town more famous for its cornfields and conservative values than for the kind of thrill-seeking that Derek openly craved. Outwardly, Derek was the perfect image of a charismatic, outgoing man who seemed to have it all. His confidence and charm made him a popular figure in his community, and his real estate business was thriving. He was known for his love of adventure and excitement, always the first to suggest a daring activity or exotic vacation. Derek's love for life's thrills, including those of a sexual kind, extended beyond his career and into his personal life, where he sought out experiences that pushed boundaries. This desire for excitement led Derek and his wife, Janice, to book a trip on an adults-only cruise through the Caribbean in April of 2015. This cruise, marketed as an exotic getaway for couples seeking to spice up their relationships, promised a week of sun, sea, and illicit sex. Derek saw it as the perfect opportunity to explore the more daring side of his sexual interests. Despite his adventurous nature, Derek's life wasn't without its darker sides. Friends described him as someone who could be controlling, particularly in his relationships. This side of Derek had surfaced more often in recent years, straining his marriage to Janice, a quiet and somewhat meek woman. Yet Derek remained determined to revive the spark in their relationship through illicit sexual practices such as swinging and wife swapping, believing that this cruise could be the answer to his marital problems. In the days leading up to their departure, Derek tried to force Janice to go on the cruise with him, in the belief that this trip would bring them closer together. He painted a picture of excitement and intimacy that he hoped would rekindle their romance. But behind his confident exterior, Derek was unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface of his marriage. As the cruise approached, Derek's dreams were filled with visions of adventure and passion. He was ready to dive into the experience, never imagining that it would be the last adventure of his life. On the morning of April 14, 2015, at approximately 9 o'clock a.m., a housekeeper aboard the luxurious cruise ship made a grisly discovery. Her name was Luisa Palacio Ortiz, a 32-year-old woman from San Juan, Puerto Rico, who had been working on the ship for nearly 5 years. As she went about her usual routine, cleaning the cabins while most passengers were at breakfast, she approached cabin 827, the suite assigned to Derek and Janice Orville. When Luisa knocked on the door and received no answer, she assumed the couple had gone out for the day. Using her master key, she entered the room to begin her cleaning. Almost immediately, Luisa noticed something was wrong. The room was eerily quiet, and a strange, heavy smell lingered in the air. As she stepped further into the cabin, Luisa's eyes were drawn to the bed, where she saw Derek Orville's body. He was naked, lying face down on the bed, the mouth gagged and his hands bound to the bedpost with metal chains. A pillow was pressed tightly over his face, and there were no signs of movement. Shocked, Luisa froze for a moment, trying to process what she was seeing. Her heart raced and she felt a wave of nausea. But years of working on the ship had taught her to stay calm in emergencies. Quickly, she backed out screaming of the room and ran down the hallway to the nearest phone. She dialed the ship's emergency number and reported what she had found. Within minutes, ship security arrived at the scene, and the area was cordoned off to prevent any passengers from entering. Luisa, visibly shaken, was taken to a private area where she was given water and comforted by a fellow crew member. She later told investigators that she had never seen anything like this before and hoped never to see it again. The discovery of Derek's body sent shockwaves through the ship. Spicy gossip spread quickly among the passengers, who had been enjoying a sunny day at sea, completely unaware of the dark turn the cruise had taken. Many gathered in small groups, whispering about what had happened, as the ship's crew and authorities prepared to handle the unfolding tragedy. Within an hour of the discovery, the ship's captain, Mark Reynolds, had alerted the local authorities at the nearest port, St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. By 10:30 a.m. on April 14, 2015, a team of detectives from the Virgin Islands Police Department, led by Detective Samuel Torres, boarded the cruise ship. Torres, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and methodical approach, was accompanied by a forensic specialist and her assistant. The team moved quickly to secure the crime scene, taking every precaution to ensure that no evidence was contaminated. As Torres entered cabin 827, he was struck by the stark contrast between the luxury of the room and the brutal reality of the crime. The cabin, with its plush bedding, elegant furniture, and ocean views, was immaculately clean, too clean. The air was heavy with the scent of cleaning products, which suggested that the scene had been deliberately sanitized. Derek Orgel's naked body lay undisturbed on the bed, still bound with metal chains and gagged with a ball, a pillow pressed tightly against his nose. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no obvious fingerprints, indicating that the killer had taken great care in covering their tracks. The medical examiner immediately began her examination of the body, noting the ligature marks on Derek's wrists and ankles. The chains were heavy and industrial-looking, not something typically found on a cruise ship, raising suspicions that they had been brought on board specifically for this possibly sexual purpose. They also observed that Derek's lips were tinged blue, a clear sign of suffocation. The time of death was estimated to be around 2:00 a.m. based on the body's rigidity and temperature. Meanwhile, Torres meticulously searched the room for any additional clues. They used luminol to check for traces of blood, but the tests came back negative, further supporting the theory that the scene had been carefully cleaned. Torres also ordered a sweep of the cabin for any hair, fibers, or other forensic evidence that might have been overlooked. The detectives were puzzled by the lack of any clear evidence pointing to a suspect. Everything about the scene suggested a premeditated, calculated murder by someone who knew Derek's preferences and tendencies. As the investigation continued, the crew and passengers were questioned. Ship logs were reviewed to identify anyone who might have entered or exited the cabin during the night. But the initial search yielded few leads, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. The team realized they were dealing with a highly skilled and possibly cold-blooded killer. The first person Detective Samuel Torres focused on was Janice Orville, Derek's wife of 20 years. Janice, 45, was a quiet, unassuming librarian from Mankato, Minnesota. She had always been the opposite of her outgoing husband. Where Derek was adventurous and charismatic, Janice was reserved and meek. Her friends described her as a kind but somewhat timid woman who often felt overpowered by Derek's larger-than-life personality. She had spent most of her life supporting Derek's ambitions, including his desire to sexually experiment with this adults-only cruise. When Torres brought Janice in for questioning on the afternoon of April 14, she appeared visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. Janice was cooperative, but her demeanor was that of a woman who had been pushed to the brink. As she recounted the events of the previous night, her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. She told Torres that Derek had been excited about the cruise, particularly about exploring their sexual relationship in new ways, something that had always made her uncomfortable. Janice admitted that she had reluctantly agreed to participate in Derek's wife-swapping fantasy, hoping it would satisfy her husband's increasingly kinky sexual needs. But as the days went on, Janice, already off-kilter, having never even seen the ocean in her life, became increasingly uneasy with her husband's sexual arrangements. She described feeling trapped by Derek's insatiable appetite for bizarre sexual situations and disgusted by the situations he practically forced her into. The night before Derek's death, the couple had argued in their cabin. Janice told Torres that Derek had demanded her to have sex with Marina Davis Lockley, one of the other participants in the wife-swapping arrangement, while he watched. Janice had refused, leading to a heated argument. She admitted to feeling both angry and humiliated, but she insisted that she had left the cabin to cool off, spending the night walking around the ship's deck, staring out at the ocean and praying for strength. Torres pressed Janice on the details of the argument, trying to determine if her anger could have driven her to kill Derek. However, Janice remained calm and composed, showing no signs of the rage that might have led to such a brutal murder. Despite her discomfort with the situation, Janice maintained that she would never have harmed Derek, whom she had loved for so many years. The detectives noted her demeanor, But they couldn't ignore the potential motive, a combination of fear, resentment, and desperation that made Janice a key suspect. The second suspect in Derek Orgel's murder was Brian Davis, a 47-year-old investment banker from Long Island, New York. Brian was everything Derek admired: successful, confident, and charismatic, with a reputation as a ladies' man. He had been married to Marina Davis Lockley, a serene British yoga instructor, for 10 years. But their relationship was anything but traditional. Ryan and Marina were in an open marriage, a fact they were open about, particularly during this adults-only cruise. Ryan's involvement in the wife-swapping arrangement had started as a thrill-seeking adventure, something he was always up for. Friends described him as a smooth talker who could charm anyone into doing almost anything. On a cruise, Ryan quickly bonded with Derek, who shared his enthusiasm for pushing sexual boundaries. The two men seemed to hit it off immediately, and by the third day of the trip, they had agreed to swap wives. But it wasn't just Derek's wife, Janice, who caught Brian's eye. Ryan also became attracted to Derek himself, enjoying the power dynamics that Derek liked to impose, and the two regularly heading to the nearest bathroom to have sex with each other. When Detective Samuel Torres brought Brian in for questioning, Ryan was dressed in a casual polo shirt and khaki shorts, looking more like someone about to hit the golf course than a murder suspect. He was relaxed, almost too relaxed, as he spoke to Torres. Brian admitted that he and Derek had become close and had even become sexual partners. However, he denied any involvement in Derek's death. Brian claimed that the last time he saw Derek was the night before, during a tense encounter where Derek had demanded that Brian and Marina engage in a sexual act with Janice while he watched. Brian, who said he, quote, hates conflict, said the situation had become uncomfortable, and he had left the cabin with Marina, returning to their own room for the night. Torres noticed that Brian's calm demeanor never wavered, even when the questioning became more intense. Brian spoke confidently, his answers quick and to the point. He acknowledged that the wife-swapping experience with Janice and Derek had not been what he expected, admitting that the tension between the couples had escalated as the week went on. However, he insisted that while the situation had grown awkward, he had no reason to kill Derek. Brian's alibi, spending the night with Marina in the cabin, was supported by key card records, but Torres couldn't shake the feeling that Brian was hiding something. The motive was clear: jealousy, desire, and a hunger for control. Ryan's interest in both Derek and Janice, coupled with the possibility of a love triangle turning deadly, made him a prime suspect. But without solid evidence, Torres knew he needed more to connect Brian directly to the murder. The investigation took a significant turn on April 16, 2015, 2 days after Derek Orgel's body was discovered. The morning was overcast, with a light drizzle making the deck of the cruise ship slick. Detective Samuel Torres was growing frustrated. Despite the interrogations and a meticulous search of Derek's cabin, the team still hadn't uncovered any decisive evidence pointing to the killer. The crime scene was clean, and the few witnesses were either too intoxicated or too focused on their own affairs to provide useful information. But that morning, new evidence emerged that changed the direction of the investigation. A maintenance worker named Caloy Mendez, who had been cleaning the ship's storage rooms, found a small, nondescript digital camera tucked away behind some cleaning supplies. The camera looked out of place, and its memory card was missing. Caloy, who had heard about the murder on the ship, immediately turned it over to the ship's security team. They, in turn, passed it on to Torres and his team. The camera was a simple handheld model, the kind anyone might carry on vacation. It was slightly scuffed, suggesting it had been hastily discarded. Torres hoped the camera might contain some useful information, so he sent it to the forensic lab on board the ship for analysis. Within a few hours, the technicians had managed to recover several deleted files from the camera's internal memory. What they found was shocking. The recovered footage showed several sexual encounters between the two couples involved in the wife-swapping arrangement: Derek and Janice Orville, and Brian and Marina Davis. The videos, recorded without Janice's knowledge, revealed the increasing tension and discomfort she felt, particularly during the final night of Derek's life. One of the most disturbing clips showed a heated argument between Derek and Janice in their cabin. Derek, visibly angry, was pressuring Janice to participate in a sexual act with Marina while they watched. Janice was seen crying, pleading with Derek to stop, but he refused. The video cut off abruptly, but it was clear that Janice had been pushed to her emotional limit. This new evidence provided a much clearer picture of what might have happened that night. It also gave Torres a better understanding of Janice's state of mind in the hours leading up to the murder. The footage, combined with her earlier testimony, suggested that Janice's fear and desperation had reached a boiling point, possibly leading to Derek's death. Torres now had the motive he needed, but he still needed to confirm if Janice had actually committed the murder. The third suspect in the investigation was Marina Davis-Lockley, a 39-year-old yoga instructor from Stoke-on-Trent, England. Marina was known for her calm demeanor and spiritual outlook on life. She had met her husband, Ryan Davis, 10 years earlier while teaching a yoga class in New York City. Despite their different backgrounds, Marina being quiet and introspective, Brian being outgoing and ambitious, the couple seemed to complement each other. Their open marriage, however, was a source of curiosity and sometimes judgment from those who knew them. Marina had initially been reluctant about the wife-swapping arrangement that Brian and Derek had proposed. She wasn't as adventurous as her husband and felt uncomfortable with the idea, but she agreed to it in an effort to keep their marriage strong. As the cruise progressed, Marina found herself increasingly uneasy with the sexual dynamics between the two couples. Derek's dominant behavior, particularly his insistence on controlling the situation, clashed with Marina's desire for peace and balance. She began to distance herself from their wanton sexual activities, often retreating to the ship's yoga classes or spending time alone on the deck, staring out at the endless Caribbean Sea. Detective Samuel Torres brought Marina in for questioning after the disturbing footage from her camera was found. The videos, however, clearly showed Marina's discomfort during the sexual encounters, and Torres wanted to understand her state of mind. Marina appeared calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension in her eyes. Torres began by asking Marina about her relationship with Derek and Janice. Marina admitted that she felt sympathy for Janice, who seemed overwhelmed by Derek's controlling nature. She also expressed regret for agreeing to the wife-swapping arrangement, acknowledging that it had brought nothing but stress and anxiety. She admitted to the videos, saying that she had secretly recorded all their sexual encounters on the cruise for pragmatic reasons only. She told police she was planning to sell the footage to an adult film company as she and Brian were in deep financial trouble. When Torres pressed her about the night of Derek's murder, Marina's calm facade began to crack. She admitted that she had left Derek in Janice's cabin early, unable to bear the situation any longer. However, she denied any involvement in Derek's death. Torres noted that Marina's responses were measured but tinged with a quiet resolve. She seemed genuinely saddened by Derek's death, but also relieved that the ordeal was over. Despite her calm exterior, Torres couldn't help but wonder if Marina's desire to protect Janice had driven her to an extreme action. The possibility that Marina had acted out of a protective instinct, combined with her own discomfort, made her a serious suspect. However, without concrete evidence linking her directly to the crime, Boris knew he would have to dig deeper to find the truth. The breakthrough in the investigation came on April 18, 2015, 4 days after Derek Orgel's body was found. Detective Samuel Torres had spent days reviewing the footage recovered from the hidden camera, piecing together the events leading up to Derek's murder. The evidence pointed to only one person who had the motive, opportunity, and means to carry out the crime: Janice Orville, Derek's wife. Janice, a 45-year-old librarian from Mankato, Minnesota, had been a quiet, supportive partner throughout their 20-year marriage. But the cruise had exposed the deep cracks in their relationship. Derek's domineering behavior and insistence on pushing Janice into increasingly uncomfortable sexual situations had taken a toll on her. The footage from the camera revealed Janice's growing distress, particularly during the final night of Derek's life. The video showed Derek demanding that Janice participate in a sexual act with Marina Davis while he watched, bound and gagged. Janice's tearful pleas for Derek to stop went unanswered, and the video cut off just as tensions reached a boiling point. Torres was convinced that Janice had snapped under the pressure, leading her to suffocate Derek with a pillow while he was helpless. On the morning of April 18th, Torres, along with 2 other officers, went to confront Janice in her cabin. The sun was just rising, casting a soft glow over the ship as it continued its journey through the Caribbean. Janice opened the door, her face pale and eyes red from days of sleeplessness. She knew why they were there. Torres informed Janice that she was under arrest for the murder of her husband. Janice didn't resist. Instead, she simply nodded, her hands trembling as she was handcuffed. She seemed resigned to her fate, as if the weight of the past week had finally crushed her spirit. As she was led away, Other passengers watched in shocked silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. Back in Mankato, news of Janice's arrest spread quickly. The small town, where Derek had been a well-known realtor, was stunned. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming librarian with the shocking crime she was accused of committing. Derek's parents were devastated. They had always seen Janice as the perfect wife for their son, and now they were grappling with the horror that she had taken his life. The arrest marked the beginning of a long legal process, but for Torres, it was the culmination of a tense and emotionally charged investigation. He had seen the toll the situation had taken on everyone involved. And while Janice's arrest brought some closure, it also left many questions about the true nature of the relationship between Derek and Janice, and how it had all gone so terribly wrong. Janice Orgel's trial began on October 12, 2015, in Miami-Dade County Court. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and the families of both Derek and Janice, all eager to see justice served. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Maria Paulina Sanchez, 38, was determined to paint Janice as a cold-blooded killer. Sanchez, known for her no-nonsense approach and sharp cross-examinations, argued that Janice had meticulously planned Derek's murder as a way to escape their failing marriage. She presented the hidden camera footage as key evidence, highlighting Janice's growing distress and the final confrontation on the night of the murder. Sanchez asserted that Janice had deliberately suffocated Derek, using the pillow as the murder weapon, in a premeditated act of violence. The defense, led by public defender Ellen Goldstein, 52, painted a very different picture. Goldstein, a seasoned attorney known for his empathetic style, argued that Janice had acted in self-defense after years of psychological abuse. He described Derek as a controlling and manipulative husband who had forced Janice into humiliating situations. Goldstein claimed that Janice's actions were the result of a mental breakdown brought on by the extreme stress of the cruise and Derek's relentless pressure. Throughout the trial, Janice remained stoic, her eyes often downcast as she listened to the testimony. The Orgel family sat in the front row, their grief palpable. Derek's mother, Linda Orville, broke down in tears several times, unable to comprehend how the woman she once considered a daughter could have killed her son. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning with a verdict. On October 27, 2015, Janice Orgel was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some closure to Derek's family, but it also left them with a deep sense of loss. They felt the sentence was too lenient, given the brutal nature of Derek's death. Janice's family, on the other hand, expressed relief that she had not been sentenced to life in prison, though they were devastated by the outcome. The trial had been a painful experience for everyone involved, leaving scars that would take years to heal. After the trial, the lives of everyone involved were irrevocably changed. Janice Orgel began serving her 50-year sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution, a women's prison in Ocala, Florida. Life behind bars was a harsh adjustment for Janice, who had spent most of her life in the quiet comfort of her Minnesota home. The once mousy librarian now faced a daily reality filled with strict routines, overcrowded cells, and limited contact with the outside world. She kept mostly to herself, spending her days reading and occasionally teaching other inmates how to read and write. Back in Mankato, Derek Orgel's family struggled to move forward. His parents, Robert and Linda, were consumed by grief, unable to accept the loss of their only son. The house that once echoed with Derek's lively presence now felt unbearably empty. Robert, who had always been proud of Derek's achievements, became a shell of his former self, rarely leaving the house. Linda sought solace in her church community, finding comfort in prayer and the support of fellow parishioners, but the pain of losing Derek remained a constant companion. Ryan Davis and Marina Davis Lockley, the other couple involved in the wife-swapping arrangement, returned to Long Island after the trial. The scandal had destroyed their reputation and left their marriage in tatters. Brian, once a successful investment banker, lost his job after the company learned about the trial and the secret recordings he had made. Marina, who had been a respected yoga instructor, found it impossible to continue teaching, as her clients abandoned her in the wake of the scandal. The couple eventually divorced, each trying to rebuild their lives separately. For the community of Mankato, the case served as a harsh reminder of how quickly life can change. The trial and its aftermath were the talk of the town for months, as people struggled to reconcile the Janice they knew with the woman convicted of such a horrific crime. Suzette Anaki was a 44-year-old manager at Ruby Tuesdays, a popular restaurant chain known for its American fare and salad bar. She lived in a large suburban McMansion in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a city known for its friendly neighborhoods and good schools. Suzette was an ambitious and outgoing woman. Her friends and family described her as someone who lived life to the fullest. She loved adventure sports like hiking and rock climbing, and she often spent her weekends exploring nature trails and cliffs. Suzette's educational journey began at Broken Arrow High School, where she was known for her excellent grades and participation in various clubs. She later attended the University of Oklahoma, where she majored in business management. Her education helped her rise quickly in her career, and she was deeply committed to her job at Ruby Tuesdays, where she was a respected manager. Suzette had a close-knit family. She was married to Danny Anaki, and she had a teenage daughter named Luna Anaki from her ex-husband Ross. Her relationship with Danny was complex, with periods of intense affection and moments of jealousy. Luna, an 18-year-old college student at Oklahoma State University, looked up to her mother and shared her adventurous spirit. Suzette's friends described her as fiercely loyal and always ready to help those in need. She was the kind of person who made everyone feel special. She had a magnetic personality that drew people to her. Her colleagues admired her work ethic and her ability to manage the restaurant efficiently while maintaining a friendly atmosphere. In the days leading up to her death, Suzette was particularly excited about a new managerial project at work. She had been working on improving the restaurant's customer service and menu options. She also planned a weekend hiking trip with her friends to celebrate the successful completion of the project. Suzette's dreams included further advancing her career and spending more time with her family and friends. She was looking forward to the upcoming fall season, with plans to visit local pumpkin patches and attend the Tulsa State Fair. On the evening of September 13, 2002, Suzette spent time with her family, discussing their plans for the weekend. She was in high spirits, full of hope and excitement for the future. Sadly, her dreams were cut short the following morning when her life was tragically taken. On the morning of September 14, 2002, the sky was overcast, and a light drizzle fell over Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. At around 7:30 a.m., Luna Anaki, an 18-year-old college student, woke up and went to her mother's large walk-in closet in her family's large suburban home. Luna had plans to meet friends later that day, but first, she wanted to check on her mother, Suzette. As Luna entered the closet, she was met with a horrific sight. Her mother, Suzette Anaki, lay lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. Several belts, possibly the murder weapon, were scattered around her body. Luna's initial shock turned to sheer panic. She screamed and fell to her knees beside her mother. Struggling to maintain her composure, Luna reached for the phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking as she reported the brutal scene. The 911 call was received at 7:35 a.m. Luna, barely able to speak through her tears, described what she saw. The dispatcher stayed on the line with her, offering calm reassurances until the police arrived. Luna's frantic call sent a wave of urgency through the Broken Arrow Police Department. When the first responders arrived, they found Luna in a state of deep shock, sitting on the front steps of the house, her clothes stained with blood from holding her mother. The officers quickly secured the scene, ensuring no one could enter or leave the house while they began their investigation. The discovery of Suzette's body sent shockwaves through the Broken Arrow community. News quickly spread, and by midday, local media, including the Tulsa World newspaper and TV stations like KOTV Channel 6, were reporting on the tragic incident. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Anaki home, offering their support and expressing their disbelief. Suzette Anaki's murder marked the beginning of a complex investigation. The police were determined to uncover the truth behind her brutal death and bring her killer to justice. As they worked tirelessly, the impact of Suzette's death resonated through the community, leaving everyone grappling with the loss of a beloved friend, colleague, and mother. When the Broken Arrow Police Department received Luna Anaki's frantic 911 call on September 14, 2002, they knew they had to act fast. The sky was overcast, and a light drizzle continued as officers rushed to the scene. Detective Mark Corley, a seasoned investigator with 15 years on the force, led the team. Known for his sharp eye and calm demeanor, Corley arrived with his partner, Detective Susan Alera, who had a reputation for her meticulous attention to detail. When Corley and Alera entered the Anaki home, they were met with a gruesome scene. Suzette Anaki's body lay in the middle of her large walk-in closet, surrounded by belts stained with blood. The room showed clear signs of a struggle. Blood splatters covered the walls and furniture, indicating the violent nature of the attack. The detectives noted the presence of nunchucks, hinting at a possible history of abuse. The police quickly secured the crime scene, ensuring that no evidence would be disturbed. Horrifying began by documenting everything meticulously. He photographed the body, the belts, and the nunchucks, making sure to capture every detail. Illyria, meanwhile, collected physical evidence, carefully bagging the belts for forensic analysis. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Suzette likely knew her attacker. The medical examiner arrived shortly after to examine Suzette's body. The deep lacerations caused by the belts confirmed that Suzette had died from blunt force trauma. The brutal nature of the attack indicated intense rage, pointing to a personal motive. While Coralie and Illyria worked inside, uniformed officers canvassed the neighborhood. They interviewed neighbors and potential witnesses, hoping to gather information that could lead to a suspect. One neighbor mentioned hearing loud arguments from the Anaki home the night before, adding a crucial detail to the timeline. Detective Coralie and his team continued their investigation late into the evening. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and dusted for fingerprints. The evidence pointed to a personal and deeply emotional motive behind Suzette's murder. As they processed the crime scene, the detectives were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Suzette and her grieving family. The thorough work of the Broken Arrow Police Department laid the foundation for solving this tragic case. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, brought them one step closer to identifying Suzette's killer. The first suspect in Suzette Anaki's murder was her husband, Danny Anaki. At 48 years old, Danny was known for his intelligence and meticulous nature. He worked as an accountant, a job that suited his detail-oriented personality. However, those who knew Danny also described him as emotionally distant and sometimes jealous, especially regarding his relationship with Suzette. Detective Mark Coralie and Detective Susan Illyria brought Danny in for questioning on the afternoon of September 14, 2002. The police station was abuzz with activity as the news of Suzette's murder spread. Danny appeared calm but nervous, a stark contrast to the horror that had unfolded in his home. Coralie started the interrogation by asking Danny to recount his activities the night before. Danny claimed he had been working late on a project for a client and then went to bed early. However, his alibi quickly began to fall apart. When detectives checked with his workplace, they found no record of him being there late. Moreover, Danny's colleagues mentioned that he had left the office at his usual time. During the questioning, Danny remained mostly composed but showed signs of discomfort when asked about his relationship with Suzette. He admitted that they had arguments, mainly about his jealousy and her long hours at work. Danny also acknowledged that he was aware of Suzette's close friendship with Ross Cambray, her ex-husband who often helped around the house. However, he denied any involvement in her murder. The detectives pressed further, asking about the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene. Danny hesitated but eventually admitted that the belts were his. He said he used them for his martial arts hobby, but insisted he had never used them to hurt Suzette. His answers were evasive, and his calm demeanor began to crack, revealing glimpses of anger and frustration. Detectives Coralie and Illyria noticed these changes in his behavior. They believed that Danny's meticulous and controlling nature could have driven him to commit the crime, especially if he felt threatened by Suzette's independence or her relationship with Ross. As the interrogation continued, Danny's responses grew more erratic. He alternated between calm denials and angry outbursts, raising the detectives' suspicions further. The interview ended with Danny still professing his innocence, but the inconsistencies in his story and his emotional volatility painted a different picture. The investigation into Danny Anaki was just beginning. Detectives Coralie and Illyria knew they needed more evidence to connect him to Suzette's murder. But with each question, Danny became a more likely suspect in the eyes of the police. The next suspect in Suzette Anaki's murder was Ross Cambray, her 37-year-old ex-husband. Ross was disciplined, energetic, and known for his supportive nature. He worked as a fitness trainer at a local gym, a job that suited his active lifestyle. He had known Suzette since college, and their friendship remained strong over the years despite their divorce 8 years before. Ross was frequently seen at the Anaki home, helping with the garden and house repairs. On the morning of September 15, 2002, detectives Mark Coralie and Susan Illyria brought Ross in for questioning. The police station was filled with reporters, all eager for updates on the case. Ross appeared cooperative but visibly nervous as he sat down with the detectives. Detective Coralie began the interrogation by asking Ross about his relationship with Suzette and Danny. Ross admitted that he was still very close to Suzette and considered her one of his best friends. He also acknowledged his friendship with Danny, but noted that their relationship had become strained over time. As the questioning continued, Ross dropped a bombshell. He revealed that he had been secretly having sex with both Danny and Suzette, unbeknownst to each other. This revelation shocked the detectives, adding a new layer of complexity to the case. Ross explained that the relationships had been going on for several months, and he felt deeply conflicted about them. Detective Valera asked Ross if he had any knowledge of the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene. Ross shook his head and insisted he had never seen Danny use them for anything other than martial arts practice. He also stated that he had no idea about any abuse in the Anaki household. Ross's demeanor was a mix of nervousness and cooperation. He answered the detectives' questions honestly but seemed deeply troubled by the situation. He explained that on the night of Suzette's murder, he had been at home, alone, watching Jimmy Neutron and Rugrats. Unfortunately, he had no one to corroborate his alibi. The detectives found Ross's confession about the secret relationships to be both surprising and suspicious. It gave Ross a potential motive. If Suzette or Danny had discovered the affairs, it could have led to a violent confrontation. However, Ross's genuine sadness and shock over Suzette's death made it hard to believe he could commit such a brutal crime. As the interrogation ended, Ross was released but remained a person of interest. Detectives Coralie and Valera knew they needed to dig deeper into Ross's background and alibi to determine if he had any involvement in Suzette's murder. The investigation was becoming more complex, with each suspect revealing new and startling information. On September 17, 2002, 3 days after Suzette Anaki's murder, the investigation took a crucial turn. The day was clear and sunny, providing a stark contrast to the grim task at hand. Detective Mark Coralie received a call from a neighbor who had found something unusual in her backyard while gardening. She had unearthed a blood-stained shirt buried in the dirt. Detectives Coralie and Susan Alera rushed to the scene to collect the evidence. The neighbor handed over the shirt, immense size, and it appeared to have been hastily buried. They carefully placed it in an evidence bag, knowing it could be a key piece in solving the case. Back at the police station, the shirt was sent to the forensic lab for analysis. Meanwhile, Coralie and Alera reviewed the case files and the alibis of their suspects. The new evidence could potentially break the case wide open. The forensic team worked quickly to analyze the shirt. By late afternoon, they had found DNA that matched Danny Anaki. This finding was significant and placed Danny at the crime scene, providing physical evidence linking him to the murder. With this new evidence in hand, the detectives dug deeper into Danny's background. They discovered a disturbing pattern of abuse. Suzette had been brutally abused by Danny. He frequently beat her with belts, one in each hand, in what he called cowboy style. He also used a pair of nunchucks for what he referred to as a ninja beating. These findings painted a horrifying picture of Suzette's life and suggested a motive driven by Danny's violent tendencies and control issues. The third suspect in the investigation was Luna Anaki, Suzette's 18-year-old daughter. Luna was a charismatic and ambitious college student at Oklahoma State University, known for her social skills and persuasive nature. She had a magnetic personality and was popular among her peers. However, Luna had been hiding a significant secret. She was pregnant with her stepfather Danny's child. On September 18, 2002, detectives Mark Coralie and Susan Illara brought Luna in for questioning at the Broken Arrow Police Department. Luna appeared calm but apprehensive as she sat down with the detectives. Detective Coralie began by asking Luna about her relationship with her mother and stepfather. Luna spoke fondly of her mother, describing her as a loving and adventurous person. When asked about Danny, Luna hesitated before revealing the shocking details of their affair. She admitted that the relationship had been ongoing for several years and that she was pregnant with his child. The detectives were stunned by Luna's confession. They questioned her about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Luna claimed she had been out with friends, celebrating a successful exam. However, her friends' statements were inconsistent, and some couldn't confirm seeing her that night. Detective Valera asked Luma if she had any knowledge of the belts and nunchucks found at the crime scene. Luma's eyes widened, and she appeared genuinely shocked. She denied any involvement in her mother's murder and insisted that she loved Suzette deeply. Despite her calm demeanor, the detectives noticed signs of stress and fear. Luna's potential motive was complex. If Suzette had discovered the affair and the pregnancy, it could have led to a confrontation. However, Luna's genuine grief over her mother's death made it difficult to believe she was involved. The detectives decided to dig deeper into Luna's background and relationships. As the interrogation continued, Luna maintained her innocence but admitted that her relationship with Danny was a mistake. She expressed remorse for the pain it had caused and seemed genuinely devastated by her mother's death. Despite Luna's emotional responses, the detectives knew they had to consider all possibilities. They reviewed her alibi and questioned her friends again, looking for any inconsistencies. Luna's complex relationship with Danny and her secret pregnancy added layers to the investigation, making it one of the most challenging aspects of the case. Luna's interview ended with more questions than answers. The detectives knew they needed concrete evidence to determine her involvement, if any, in Suzette's murder. The investigation was far from over, and every new piece of information brought them closer to the truth. With the discovery of the blood-stained shirt and the pattern of abuse, the Broken Arrow Police Department felt confident they had identified Suzette Anaki's murderer. On September 18, 2002, detectives Mark Corley and Susan Alera pieced together the evidence pointing to Danny Anaki as the killer. The weather was clear, mirroring the clarity with which the case had come into focus. Danny Anaki, a 48-year-old accountant, had shown signs of jealousy and violent tendencies. Investigators learned that Danny had been abusing Suzette for years. He would beat her with belts, one in each hand, a method he called cowboy style. He also used nunchucks, referring to this brutal practice as ninja beating. This abuse, combined with his desire to be with his stepdaughter Luna, who was also pregnant with his child, motivated him to commit the murder. Danny believed that killing Suzette would allow him to start a new life with Luna without the complications of a divorce. Additionally, he stood to gain financially from Suzette's life insurance policy. On the night of September 14, 2002, under the guise of another abusive episode, Danny whipped Suzette to death cowboy style with his belts in their large suburban home. Detectives Corley and Alera gathered all the evidence, including witness testimonies and forensic analysis, and presented their case to the district attorney. The decision was made to arrest Danny for Suzette's murder. On the morning of September 18, the police planned the arrest. Under a clear sky, they approached Danny's office, knowing that apprehending him in public would prevent any potential escape or harm to others. Danny was taken into custody without incident. He appeared shocked and tried to maintain his innocence, but the overwhelming evidence against him made his guilt apparent. Suzette's family, particularly her daughter Luna, had mixed reactions. Luna was torn between the loss of her mother and the arrest of her stepfather and secret lover. Friends and neighbors expressed relief that the alleged perpetrator was in custody, hoping for justice for Suzette. The arrest marked a significant step towards closure for Suzette's family and friends. Detective Corley and Detective Alera, who had worked tirelessly on the case, felt a sense of accomplishment but knew the journey was far from over. The trial would be the next hurdle in bringing full justice to Suzette Anaki's tragic end. The trial of Danny Anaki began in late September 2002, capturing the attention of the Broken Arrow community and the media. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James D. Capria, a 45-year-old known for his sharp mind and dedication to justice. He presented the case with determination, focusing on the evidence that painted Danny as a violent and controlling husband who murdered his wife, Suzette, to be with his stepdaughter Luna and benefit from a life insurance policy. Capria outlined the abuse Suzette had endured, including the horrific cowboy style and ninja beating methods Danny used. He detailed the events of the night of September 14, emphasizing the bloodstained shirt and the DNA evidence linking Danny to the crime scene. Capria called witnesses, including neighbors and forensic experts, who testified about the abuse and the evidence. The defense attorney, Robert Angel Corley, a 50-year-old with a calm demeanor and years of experience in criminal defense, argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Danny was a loving husband who was being unfairly targeted. Corley suggested that the real killer could have been someone else, possibly Ross Cambry or even Luma. He questioned the reliability of the witness testimonies and the forensic evidence, trying to cast doubt in the minds of the jurors. Throughout the trial, Suzette's family watched with heavy hearts. Luna, torn between the loss of her mother and the arrest of her stepfather and lover, appeared visibly distressed. Friends and neighbors who had known Suzette as a vibrant and loyal person were there to support the family, hoping for justice. After several days of testimonies and arguments, the jury deliberated. On October 3, 2002, they returned with a verdict. Anaki was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The severity of the punishment reflected the brutality of the crime and the betrayal of trust. Danny showed little emotion as the sentence was read, maintaining his innocence. Suzette's family, while relieved that justice had been served, was also grappling with the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of Suzette. Luna was particularly affected, struggling with her complicated feelings about Danny and the devastating impact on her life. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure to the community, but the scars of Suzette's tragic death would remain. Friends and family members tried to move forward, remembering Suzette for the loving and adventurous person she was. After the trial of Anaki, the residents of Broken Arrow tried to return to their normal lives, but the memory of Suzette Anaki's tragic death lingered. The verdict had brought a sense of justice, but the community was still healing from the shock. Danny was sent to a maximum security prison to serve his life sentence without the possibility of parole. He continued to claim his innocence, but his appeals were repeatedly denied. In prison, Danny was a model inmate, but he remained isolated and alone, reflecting on the choices that led him to this point. Luna Anaki faced a difficult path ahead. She decided to leave Oklahoma State University for a semester to take care of her mental health. The revelation of her affair with Danny and her pregnancy had left her feeling lost and overwhelmed. Luna sought therapy to help her process the trauma and rebuild her life. She moved in with her maternal grandparents, who offered her support and a safe place to grieve and heal as she raised her daughter, Yacht, as a single mother. Ross Cambry, who had been caught in the web of the investigation due to his secret relationships with both Suzette and Danny, returned to his job as a fitness trainer. The experience had changed him profoundly, and he became more private and introspective. Ross focused on his work and avoided the spotlight, hoping to leave the past behind. Suzette's parents, devastated by the loss of their daughter, focused on supporting Luna and preserving Suzette's legacy. They created a scholarship fund in Suzette's name at the local high school, aiming to help young women pursue their dreams. The town of Broken Arrow, though scared by the tragic events, found ways to heal and remember. Suzette Anaki's story was a reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the need for kindness and understanding. Life slowly moved forward, but Suzette's vibrant spirit continued to inspire those who knew her. Myra Everson was a 25-year-old woman full of life and love. She lived in Bentonville, Arkansas, a small town known for being the home of Walmart, America's #1 retailer. Myra was very creative and loved helping people. She worked at a homeless shelter called Helping Hands and was very passionate about her job. Myra often organized events to raise money and collect donations for the shelter. She was well known in the community for her kindness and dedication. Myra was also very involved in the local art community. She loved painting and often participated in art shows and exhibitions. Her favorite place to visit was the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. She would spend hours there, admiring the works of famous artists and getting inspiration for her own creations. Myra grew up in Bentonville and went to Bentonville High School, where she was an excellent student. She was especially good at English and art. Her parents were Reverend Azazel Everson and Clara Everson. Clara passed away when Myra was only 10 years old, leaving her to be raised by her strict and controlling father. Despite her father's harsh ways, Myra remained optimistic and cheerful. She had a younger sister, Lyra, who she was very close to. Lyra often described Myra as her best friend and biggest supporter. Myra had a close-knit group of friends, including Lily Harrington, who also worked at the homeless shelter. Myra had big dreams for the future. She wanted to open her own art studio where people could come and create art together. She often talked about her plans with excitement, sharing her vision of a space filled with colorful paintings and happy people. In the days before her death, Myra was busy preparing for an art exhibition that was scheduled for the end of October 1992. She was very excited about it and spent a lot of time working on her paintings. Myra's vibrant personality and warm heart made her a beloved member of the Bentonville community. She had a way of making everyone around her feel special and loved. Her sudden and tragic death left a huge void in the lives of those who knew and loved her. On the morning of October 14, 1992, Bentonville, Arkansas, was experiencing a chilly and overcast day. At around 8 o'clock a.m., Myra's friend and co-worker, Lily Harrington, went to Myra's house. They had planned to carpool to work at the Helping Hands homeless shelter, just like they did every day. When Lily arrived, she noticed that the front door was slightly open. Thinking Myra might have stepped out for a moment, she called out her name but received no response. Lily hesitated for a moment, feeling a growing sense of unease. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room was eerily quiet, and there was a chill in the air. As she walked further into the house, she saw Myra lying on the living room floor. Lily froze in horror, unable to believe what she was seeing. Myra's face was pale, and her left hand was terribly mangled, with 3 fingers missing. Lily's heart raced as she rushed to check for signs of life, but it was clear that Myra was gone. Overwhelmed by shock and fear, Lily stumbled back and grabbed the kitchen phone to dial 911. Her voice was shaky and full of panic as she described the scene to the dispatcher. She could hardly believe that her friend was dead. The news of Myra's death spread quickly through Bentonville. By the time the police arrived, a small crowd had begun to gather outside her house. The brutal nature of Myra's murder left them with many questions. Why would someone do this to such a beloved member of the community? As the investigation began, the people of Bentonville were left in shock and fear, wondering who could have committed such a terrible crime. The police arrived quickly at Mayor Everson's house on the morning of October 14, 1992. The weather was chilly and overcast, matching the grim mood. Detective Samuel E. Myra, a seasoned investigator known for his thoroughness, led the team. Detective Karen Janell, his sharp and observant partner, was by his side. When the detectives entered the living room, they were met with a disturbing scene. The room was in disarray, with furniture knocked over and items scattered. A blood-stained belt lay on the floor, clearly the murder weapon used to strangle Myra. The sight was shocking even to the experienced detectives. Myra's body showed signs of a violent struggle, and her left hand was horribly mutilated, with 3 fingers ripped off. Detective Myra and Janell carefully examined the crime scene. They documented everything, taking numerous photographs and making detailed notes. They collected the belt and other potential evidence, such as fingerprints and fibers. The detectives also noticed a broken lamp and several books scattered around, suggesting Myra fought hard against her attacker. Forensics teams arrived shortly after to assist with the investigation. They used various tools and methods to gather evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected hair and fiber samples, and searched for any other clues that might help identify the murderer. The brutality of the crime indicated a deep personal motive, and the detectives knew they had to work quickly to solve the case. Neighbors and bystanders watched in silence as the police worked. Bentonville was a close-knit community, and the news of Myra's murder had already begun to spread. People were shocked and scared, unable to comprehend why someone would kill such a beloved young woman. Detective Myra interviewed Lily Harrington, who had found Myra's body. Lily was still in shock but managed to provide a detailed account of her discovery. She described how she found the front door ajar and the horrible sight of Myra's lifeless body on the living room floor. Her testimony gave the detectives a clearer picture of the timeline. The investigation team also spoke to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual that morning. Some reported hearing raised voices late at night, while others mentioned seeing a strange car parked nearby. The detectives took note of every detail, knowing that even the smallest clue could be crucial. As the day went on, the police continued their investigation, determined to find justice for Myra. The crime scene was methodically combed for evidence, and the detectives began to piece together the tragic events leading to her death. The investigation into Myra Everson's murder quickly turned to her father, Reverend Azazel Everson. Azazel was a well-known figure in Bentonville, Arkansas, respected for his role as a preacher. At 56 years old, he was charming and sociable, often seen as a pillar of the community. However, beneath his outward charm, Azazel had a dark and controlling side that few knew about. Detective Samuel E. Myra and Detective Karen Janell brought Azazel in for questioning on October 15, 1992. They met him at the police station, a stark contrast to the comforting atmosphere of his church. Azazel maintained a calm demeanor, but there was a noticeable tension in his eyes. During the interrogation, the detectives asked Azazel about his relationship with Myra. He spoke fondly of her but avoided details about their conflicts. However, the detectives knew from Myra's friends that she often clashed with her father. Azazel disapproved of Myra's independence and her love for books, which he saw as a rebellion against his strict beliefs, a common situation in a region where only 31% of women can read. Azazel's alibi was weak. He claimed to have been at home alone on the night of Myra's murder, reading the Book of Revelations and preparing his sermon. When asked if anyone could verify his whereabouts, Azazel became defensive, insisting his word should be enough. The detectives pressed further, asking about any recent arguments with Myra. Azazel admitted to a heated disagreement a few days before her death, but downplayed its significance. He said it was a typical father-daughter dispute. However, the detectives knew that Myra had confided in friends about her father's controlling nature and his anger over her reading habits. Despite his outward calm, Azazel showed signs of nervousness. He fidgeted with his hands and avoided direct eye contact. The detectives noted these behaviors, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Azazel's motive seemed clear. He wanted to control Myra's life and eliminate anything he saw as a threat to his authority. To gather more evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for Azazel's house. Inside, they found a hidden room in the basement. The room contained disturbing items, including restraints and various books on punishment and control. This discovery painted a darker picture of Azazel's true nature and his obsession with dominance. As the investigation continued, Azazel remained a prime suspect. His secretive and controlling behavior, combined with his weak alibi and the hidden room, made him a focal point for the detectives. They knew they had to keep digging to uncover the full truth behind Myra's tragic death. As the investigation into Myra Everson's murder continued, the detectives turned their attention to Janell Lovius. Janell was a 59-year-old oil driller from Oklahoma known for her determination and resourcefulness. She had a reputation for uncovering difficult truths and was known for her tenacity in the male-dominated field of oil drilling. On October 17, 1992, Detectives Samuel E. Myra and Karen Janell traveled to Oklahoma to interview Janell. They met her at her modest home, which was filled with mementos from her work and travels. Janell greeted them with a firm handshake, her eyes sharp and inquisitive. During the interview, Janell spoke openly about her relationship with Myra. She admitted that they had become close friends and had even formed a sexual relationship. Janell revealed that Myra had hired her to kill Reverend Azazel Everson after he beat her for reading a novel by the novelist Joyce Lehman. Janell explained that she had grown protective of Myra and wanted to help her escape her father's control. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of Myra's murder, Janell provided a solid alibi. She was working on an oil rig out in West Texas and had several coworkers who could confirm her presence. Despite her strong alibi, the detectives were intrigued by her connection to Myra and her deep-seated hatred for Azazel. Janell described Azazel as a cruel and manipulative man who used his position as a preacher to control and abuse his daughter. She spoke passionately about how she wanted to free Myra from his grasp. Although she admitted to planning to kill Azazel, she insisted she had nothing to do with Myra's murder. Throughout the interview, Janell remained calm and composed. She answered the detectives' questions directly and showed no signs of nervousness. Her demeanor and clear alibi made it difficult for the detectives to connect her directly to the murder. However, her close relationship with Myra and her intense dislike for Azazel kept her on their radar. As the investigation into Janell continued, the detectives knew they had to explore every angle. Her strong alibi and open demeanor contrasted sharply with the disturbing nature of the crime, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. They remained determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Myra Everson. On October 20, 1992, Bentonville was experiencing a crisp, clear morning. At around 9:00 a.m., a local jogger was running along a wooded trail near Myra Everson's home. As he made his way through the path, he noticed something unusual in the bushes. Curious, he stopped to take a closer look and discovered a small, blood-stained bag partially buried under some leaves. He quickly called the police, and Detective Samuel E. Myra and Detective Karen Janell arrived at the scene shortly after. They carefully retrieved the bag and examined its contents. Inside, they found 3 severed fingers wrapped in a piece of cloth. The detectives immediately realized these were likely Myra's missing fingers. The discovery of the bag and fingers was a significant breakthrough in the case. The detectives meticulously documented the evidence and sent the bag to the forensics lab for further analysis. The lab confirmed that the fingers belonged to Myra, and the cloth was identified as part of a shirt belonging to Reverend Azazel Everson. The detectives interviewed Brian Daniels to gather more information about the discovery. Ryan described how he stumbled upon the bag while jogging and noted that he hadn't seen anyone suspicious in the area. His account was clear and straightforward, providing the detectives with a better understanding of how the evidence had been hidden. With this new evidence, the detectives turned their attention back to Reverend Azazel Everson. They believed the discovery of the fingers and the cloth linked him more closely to the crime. They obtained a search warrant for his home and conducted a thorough search. Inside Azazel's bedroom, they found a blood-stained shirt that matched the cloth found in the bag. This discovery further implicated Azazel in Myra's murder. The police also re-interviewed Lee Harrington, Myra's friend who had found her body. Lee recalled that Myra had been worried about her father's increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to her death. Myra had confided in Lee about her fear that her father might harm her. This testimony, combined with the new evidence, strengthened the case against Azazel. Detectives Myra and Janell knew they were getting closer to solving the case. The discovery of the bag and the forensic evidence provided crucial links that pointed towards Azazel as the prime suspect. The detectives continued to gather evidence, determined to bring justice to Myra Everson and uncover the full truth behind her tragic death. As the investigation into Myra Everson's murder progressed, Detectives Samuel Myra and Karen Janell discovered another tragic connection. On October 22, 1992, they received a report about the murder of Faria Haddon, a 28-year-old woman living in the nearby town of Fayetteville. Faria, like Myra, had been strangled with a belt, and 3 fingers were ripped off her left hand. Faria was known for her ambition and dedication to her work as an escort. She was discreet about her job, but had been in a secret relationship with Reverend Azazel Everson for over a year. Detectives Myra and Janell quickly realized the connection between the 2 murders and decided to investigate further. They traveled to Faria's apartment, a small but tidy place decorated with simple but elegant furnishings. Inside, the crime scene was eerily similar to Myra's. The living room showed signs of a struggle, with furniture overturned and a blood-stained belt lying on the floor. Faria's body was found in the same manner as Myra's, with her fingers missing. Detectives interviewed Faria's neighbors and acquaintances. They learned that Faria admired Azazel's charisma and saw him as her escape from a life of poverty. She had confided in a close friend about her relationship with Azazel. The friend described Faria as a hopeful and driven person who wanted a better life for herself. The detectives also found a diary in Faria's apartment where she had written about her relationship with Azazel. The diary entries revealed that Faria had discovered something disturbing about Azazel's secret life. She had found evidence linking him to illegal drug running and was planning to confront him. This discovery provided a possible motive for her murder. During the investigation, the detectives interrogated Azazel again. He was visibly more nervous this time, but he maintained his innocence. He admitted to knowing Faria, but denied any involvement in her death. His alibi for the night of Faria's murder was weak, just like his alibi for Myra's murder. Despite Azazel's denials, the detectives continued to dig deeper. They cross-referenced evidence from both crime scenes and found striking similarities. The belts used in both murders were of the same brand and size, and the method of strangulation was identical. The detectives also found fibers from Azazel's clothes on both victims, further implicating him in the crimes. The investigation into Faria's murder added a new layer of complexity to the case. The detectives were now dealing with a serial killer who had targeted 2 women connected to Azazel. They knew they had to act quickly to prevent any further tragedies and bring the murderer to justice. On October 25, 1992, Bentonville, Arkansas, woke up to a cool, rainy morning. Detective Samuel Myra and Detective Karen Janell had just received a breakthrough in their investigation. Forensic analysis of the evidence from both Myra Everson and Faria Haddon's murders pointed to a new suspect, Mark David Lilius, the husband of Janell Lilius. Mark David, a 61-year-old traveling revivalist preacher, was known for his charismatic sermons. However, his public persona hid a dark secret. He was leading a double life as a serial killer. He had carefully constructed an alibi by frequently traveling, which made it difficult to connect him to the crimes initially. Detective Myra and Detective Janell pieced together that Mark David had murdered Myra to prevent her from exposing his double life. Myra had discovered incriminating evidence against Mark David through his wife, Janell, with whom she had a sexual relationship. Faria had also found evidence of Mark David's involvement in Myra's affair and planned to confront him. To silence her, he killed her in the same brutal manner. The detectives coordinated with local police in Tulsa to track down Mark David. On the evening of October 25, they located him at a revival meeting he was hosting. The weather was stormy, with heavy rain pounding on the roof of the small church where he happened to be preaching. The police moved in quietly, not wanting to alarm the attendees. Mark David was taken into custody without resistance. He seemed surprised by the arrest but remained calm. At the police station, he was interrogated by detectives Myra and Janell. Initially, he denied any involvement, but the overwhelming evidence against him quickly broke down his facade. He confessed to the murders, explaining that he killed Myra and Faria to protect his secret life as a serial killer. He believed that if his double life were exposed, it would ruin his reputation and his wife's trust. His calm demeanor during the confession was chilling, revealing the cold and calculating nature of his crimes. The arrest of Mark David Lilius brought a mix of relief and sorrow to Bentonville. Myra's family, devastated by the loss, expressed a sense of closure knowing the murderer was caught. Faria's friends and family also found some peace in the justice served. The detectives felt the sense of accomplishment, but were also saddened by the brutal nature of the crimes. They had worked tirelessly to bring justice to Myra and Faria, and now their efforts had paid off. Bentonville could begin to heal, knowing that the person responsible for these heinous acts was behind bars. In June of 1994, the trial of Mark David Lilius, the murderer of Myra Everson and Faria Haddon, began in Bentonville, Arkansas. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Jane Kersey, a seasoned lawyer known for her dedication to justice. The defense attorney was Robert Luley, a skilled lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see justice served for the victims. Myra's family, including her sister Lyra Everson, sat in the front row, their faces filled with a mix of grief and determination. Faria's friends and supporters were also present, showing solidarity with her memory. During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case against Mark David Lilius. They called witnesses, including Detective Samuel Myra and forensic experts, to testify about the evidence linking Mark David to the murders. They also played recordings of Mark David's confession, highlighting his chilling admission of guilt. District Attorney Kersey argued that Mark David's motive for the murders was to protect his double life as a serial killer. She painted him as a cold and calculating individual who was willing to kill to preserve his reputation and keep his secrets hidden. Her impassioned closing argument resonated with the jury and the spectators alike. Defense attorney Robert Luley attempted to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. He questioned the reliability of the evidence and argued that Mark David's confession may have been coerced. He also portrayed Mark David as a devoted man of faith and pillar of the community, trying to humanize him in the eyes of the jury. After several weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Mark David Lilius was found guilty on all counts of murder. The courtroom erupted in applause as the verdict was read aloud. Myra's family embraced each other, tears of relief stringing down their faces. Faria's friends hugged each other tightly, finding solace in the knowledge that justice had been served for their friend. Mark David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought closure to the families of Myra and Faria, knowing that Mark David would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The trial and sentencing of Mark David Lilius marked the end of a long and painful chapter for Bentonville. The community could finally begin to heal, knowing that the person responsible for the murders had been held accountable for his actions. After the trial and sentencing of Mark David Lilius, life in Bentonville began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Myra Everson and Faria Haddon were remembered fondly by their loved ones, who found solace in their memories. For Myra's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but the pain of her loss lingered. Her sister, Lydia Everson, continued to honor her memory by volunteering at the homeless shelter where Myra had worked. Lydia found comfort in helping others, knowing it was what Myra would have wanted. Faria's friends organized a memorial event in her honor, inviting members of the community to share their memories of her. They created a scholarship fund in her name to support young women pursuing higher education, a cause that Faria had been passionate about. Detectives Samuel Myra and Karen Janell were hailed as heroes for their tireless efforts in solving the case. They received awards for their dedication to justice and continued to serve the community with distinction. As for Janell Lilius, she struggled to come to terms with the truth about her husband's crimes. She distanced herself from the media attention surrounding the trial and focused on rebuilding her life. Despite the betrayal she felt, she found solace in the support of friends and family. The people of Bentonville rallied together in the aftermath of the trial, united in their determination to move forward. They held fundraisers and community events to support the families of the victims and to raise awareness about domestic violence and the importance of seeking help. Bentonville, once haunted by tragedy, emerged stronger than ever, a testament to the power of unity and justice. Jared Mitchell was a 52-year-old man who lived in Greensboro, North Carolina. He was a senior executive at a large company, known for his charm and success in the business world. Jared had worked hard to climb the corporate ladder and enjoyed the perks of his high-paying job. He was often seen in nice suits and driving his luxury car around town. Jared was sociable and loved attending fancy events and parties. However, people close to him knew he had a dark side. He was narcissistic and had a long history of cheating on his wife, Amanda. Amanda Mitchell, 50, was a former high school chemistry teacher. She was kind-hearted and dedicated to her students. Amanda had a passion for science and loved sharing her knowledge with young minds. She was well-liked by her colleagues and students alike. Amanda and Jared had been married for over 20 years, and they had faced many ups and downs together. Amanda was known for her resilience, always pushing through tough times with a smile on her face. In September 2018, Amanda's world was turned upside down when she was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer. The news was devastating, but Amanda tried to stay strong. She continued to live her life as normally as possible, spending time with friends and family. However, just days after her diagnosis, Jared asked for a divorce. He had long been seeing a much younger woman, Jenna Parker Breen, in secret. Jenna was an aspiring influencer. Known for her posts on Instagram and YouTube, she often shared tips on how to snag wealthy older men, boasting about her desire for a glamorous lifestyle. Amanda was heartbroken by Jared's betrayal. She had always been supportive of him, even when he made mistakes. Now, in her time of greatest need, he had abandoned her. Despite her illness, Amanda continued to push through, supported by her close friend and colleague, Ryan Hart. Ryan often helped Amanda with daily tasks and provided a shoulder to cry on. In the days leading up to Jared's death, he was excited about his new life with Jenna. He was seen around Greensboro, dining at upscale restaurants and shopping at places like Nordstrom and Macy's. Jared seemed carefree and happy, looking forward to a future with his young girlfriend. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, and Jared was unaware of the deadly consequences that were about to unfold. On a late night in early September 2018, Jared Mitchell's lifeless body was discovered in his Greensboro home. It was around 10:30 p.m. when Brian Hart, a close friend and colleague of Amanda Mitchell, knocked on Jared's door. Amanda, worried about Jared, had asked Brian to check on him. Brian was always supportive, especially during Amanda's tough times, and he agreed to help. When Brian arrived at Jared's house, he noticed the lights were still on. He knocked several times, but there was no answer. Growing concerned, Brian used the spare key Amanda had given him. As he opened the door, he was met with an eerie silence. The house was neat, with everything in its place, but something felt off. Brian called out Jared's name, but got no response. He walked into the living room and saw Jared sitting in his favorite armchair, a glass of whiskey on the table beside him. At first glance, it looked like Jared had fallen asleep, but as Brian got closer, he realized something was terribly wrong. Jared's skin was pale, and his body was completely still. Panic set in as Brian checked for a pulse, but found none. He quickly called 911, his hands shaking. The dispatcher guided him through CPR, but it was clear that Jared was already gone. Brian was in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. He had always disliked Jared for how he treated Amanda, but he never wished for this. The first responders arrived within minutes. EMTs confirmed Jared was dead and called the police. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering about what could have happened. News spread quickly through the community, and soon local media outlets, including WFMBly News 2, reported on the mysterious death of Jared Mitchell. Everyone in Greensboro was talking about it, speculating on the cause of his sudden demise. As the investigation continued, the police knew they had a complex case on their hands. The calm and neat crime scene contrasted with the shocking nature of Jared's death, leaving everyone wondering who could have wanted him dead and why. When the police arrived at Jared Mitchell's house on that September night in 2018, they quickly took control of the situation. Detective Lisa Harper led the team. Known for her experience and sharp mind, She wasted no time in starting the investigation. The house was quiet and tidy, with no signs of a struggle. The living room, where Jared's body was found, looked normal at first glance. Jared was seated in his favorite armchair with a glass of whiskey on the table next to him. The scene seemed peaceful, but Detective Harper knew better. She ordered her team to gather evidence and take photos of everything. The toxicology test on the whiskey revealed the cause of death, rat poison. Jared had been poisoned, and the glass of whiskey was the delivery method. This discovery turned the investigation into a homicide case. Detective Harper and her team focused on the details, looking for any clues that might point to the killer. They dusted for fingerprints on the glass and other surfaces around the room. They collected samples from the whiskey bottle and checked for any signs of tampering. The method of poisoning suggested that the killer knew Jared's habits well, as the poison was mixed into his favorite drink. Detective Harper also interviewed neighbors and anyone who had seen Jared recently. Many recalled seeing him around town, dining at local restaurants like the Green Valley Grill and shopping at Friendly Center. Some remembered seeing him with his new girlfriend, Jenna Parker Breen, who was much younger and very active on social media. The police also looked into Jared's recent divorce from Amanda Mitchell. They knew that such personal turmoil could be a motive for murder. Amanda, a former chemistry teacher, had the knowledge to carry out such a crime, but her terminal illness and devastated state made her an unlikely suspect at first glance. As they dug deeper, the police discovered that Jared had been involved in several affairs, creating a long list of potential enemies. His new relationship with Jenna, his sudden divorce from Amanda, and his overall lifestyle painted a picture of a man with many secrets and enemies. The police used advanced methods to analyze the crime scene, including forensic tests and detailed interviews. They mapped out Jared's last days, trying to identify who had the opportunity and motive to poison him. The investigation was thorough, with Detective Harper leading the charge, determined to uncover the truth behind Jared Mitchell's death. The media, including local stations like Fox 8, followed the story closely. Greensboro residents were eager for answers, speculating on who could have committed such a cold-blooded act. As the police worked tirelessly, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to come together, pointing them towards the person responsible for Jared Mitchell's murder. The first suspect in Jared Mitchell's murder was his ex-wife, Amanda Mitchell. Amanda was 50 years old and had recently been diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer. She was a former high school chemistry teacher, known for her kindness and dedication. Her students loved her, and her colleagues respected her. Despite her illness, Amanda remained strong and resilient. Having been kicked out of the home she shared with Jared, she lived in a modest home in Greensboro, not far from where she used to teach. Amanda was devastated when Jared divorced her just days after her diagnosis. They had been married for over 20 years, and she had always supported him, even through his infidelities. Jared's betrayal cut deep, especially when he left her for a much younger woman, Jenna Parker Breen, when she needed him the most. Amanda's friends and family described her as heartbroken but trying to make the most of the time she had left. When the police questioned Amanda, she was calm and cooperative, though her voice was hoarse due to her cancer. Detective Lisa Harper, who led the investigation, noted Amanda's composed demeanor. Amanda explained that she had been at home, resting due to her illness, on the night of Jared's death. She expressed her sorrow over Jared's passing, despite their recent split. Amanda's motive for murder seemed clear. She had every reason to be angry and hurt by Jared's actions. However, her illness made it hard to believe she had the strength or energy to carry out such a plan. The police were also aware that Amanda's background in chemistry gave her the knowledge to use poison. Detective Harper and her team dug deeper into Amanda's life. They interviewed her friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Many described Amanda as a loving and caring person, devoted to her family and students. They couldn't imagine her committing such a crime, even with her broken heart. The police also looked into Amanda's medical records, confirming her terminal diagnosis. This evidence seemed to support her claim of being too weak to commit murder. However, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that Amanda might have used her knowledge and connections to get someone else to do the dirty work for her. The community was shocked by the turn of events, with many sympathizing with Amanda's plight. People speculated on whether she could have been driven to such an act out of sheer desperation and pain. As the investigation continued, Detective Harper kept Amanda on the suspect list, but knew they needed more evidence to either clear her or prove her guilt. The search for the truth behind Jared Mitchell's murder was far from over. and the police were determined to uncover all the facts. The second suspect in Jared Mitchell's murder was Jenna Parker Breen, Jared's new girlfriend. Jenna was 24 years old and an aspiring influencer. She had a large following on Instagram and YouTube, where she shared tips on fashion, beauty, and dating wealthy older men. Jenna was known for her ambitious and opportunistic nature, often flaunting her glamorous lifestyle online. She had moved to Greensboro recently to be with Jared, and their relationship was the talk of the town. Jenna and Jared had met at a charity event in August 2018. Jared was immediately taken by her charm and good looks, and they quickly began a relationship. Jenna saw Jared as a ticket to a luxurious life and didn't hesitate to leave her old life behind. Their relationship progressed quickly, with Jared divorcing Amanda to be with Jenna. When the police questioned Jenna, she appeared nervous and defensive. She insisted she had no reason to harm Jared, claiming they were planning their future together. Detective Lisa Harper, leading the investigation, noticed Jenna's agitation and decided to dig deeper into her background. The police found that Jenna had a history of dating older wealthy men. Her social media was filled with photos of fancy dinners at restaurants like Printworks Bistro and shopping sprees at Friendly Center. Jenna had often spoken about the importance of financial security and had a large following of young women who admired her lifestyle. Jenna's possible motive for murder was financial gain. Jared had a significant life insurance policy, and with his sudden death, Jenna stood to receive a large sum of money. This raised suspicions about whether she could have killed Jared for his wealth. However, Jenna denied any involvement, stating she loved Jared and was devastated by his death. The police also looked into Jenna's recent activities. They interviewed her friends and followers, trying to piece together her whereabouts on the night of Jared's murder. Some of Jenna's friends mentioned that she had been talking about moving to a bigger city, like Charlotte or Atlanta, which fueled the police's suspicions further. Her followers were shocked, with many expressing disbelief that Jenna could be involved in such a crime. Jenna's image as a glamorous influencer took a hit as people began to question her true motives. Despite Jenna's denials, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that she had killed Jared for his money. Detective Harper knew they needed concrete evidence to either clear Jenna or prove her guilt. The investigation continued, with the police scrutinizing every detail of Jenna's life and relationship with Jared, determined to uncover the truth. The third suspect in Jared Mitchell's murder was Brian Hart, Amanda's colleague and close friend. Brian was 35 years old and worked as a high school chemistry teacher, just like Amanda. He was known for his compassion and support, especially towards Amanda during her illness. Brian often helped Amanda with daily tasks and was vocal about his disdain for Jared's actions, making him a potential suspect. Brian and Amanda had worked together for several years and had become close friends. When Amanda was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer, Brian was there for her, providing both emotional and practical support. Many people saw Brian as a kind and caring individual who went out of his way to help others. However, his open criticism of Jared's behavior raised questions about his involvement in the murder. When the police interrogated Brian, he was calm and cooperative. He explained that he had been at home grading papers on the night of Jared's death. Detective Lisa Harper, who led the investigation, noted Brian's composed demeanor but decided to delve deeper into his relationship with Amanda and Jared. The police discovered that Jared had hired Brian to spy on Amanda and steal what little money was left to her after the divorce. This revelation painted a different picture of Brian. Although he had seemed supportive, his actions suggested a more complicated motive. Brian had financial problems and could have seen an opportunity in Jared's death to benefit himself or to help Amanda. Detective Harper and her team examined Brian's financial records and found that he had been struggling with debt. This financial stress, combined with his loyalty to Amanda, made Brian a strong suspect. They also looked into his background, checking if he had the knowledge and means to poison Jared. As a chemistry teacher, Brian had access to various chemicals, including rat poison. The police interviewed Brian's colleagues and neighbors. Many described him as a dedicated teacher and a good friend, but some mentioned his growing frustration with his financial situation. This frustration could have pushed him to take drastic measures. The community was shocked to learn that someone so close to Amanda could be a suspect. People began to question whether Brian's support for Amanda was genuine, or if it was part of a larger scheme. Despite Brian's calm exterior, the police couldn't ignore the evidence pointing towards his possible involvement. Detective Harper knew that they needed more concrete proof to either clear Brian or charge him with the crime. The investigation continued, with the police scrutinizing every aspect of Brian's life and his interactions with both Amanda and Jared, determined to uncover the truth behind Jared Mitchell's murder. On September 15, 2018, a week after Jared Mitchell's death, new evidence emerged that changed the course of the investigation. It was a sunny afternoon around 2 p.m. when Detective Lisa Harper received a call from a local resident who lived in the same neighborhood as Jared and often walked her dog in the area. That day, she had found the suspicious item in the bushes near Jenna Parker Breen's apartment complex. She handed over a small, empty, unlabeled bottle to the police. Detective Harper immediately recognized the significance of this discovery. The bottle was carefully bagged as evidence and sent to the lab for analysis. The police hoped to find fingerprints or any other trace that could link the bottle to the killer. The results came back quickly. Fingerprints on the bottle matched those of Amanda Mitchell, Jared's ex-wife. This was a shocking turn of events, as Amanda had previously been considered too weak to carry out the murder herself. Detective Harper and her team re-examined Amanda's alibi and movements on the night of the murder. The police also analyzed surveillance footage from the area around Jenna's apartment. They found footage of Amanda visiting the complex a few days before Jared's death. This raised further questions about Amanda's involvement and whether she had tried to frame Jenna for the murder. Local news stations reported on the new developments. The community was buzzing with theories and speculation. Many were shocked that Amanda, who seemed so kind and loving, could be involved in such a heinous crime. Others believed it was a desperate act driven by her terminal illness and Jared's betrayal. Detective Harper focused on interviewing Amanda again, this time with the new evidence in hand. Amanda's demeanor changed. She seemed more nervous and less composed. She struggled to explain why her fingerprints were on the rat poison bottle. Amanda admitted to visiting Jenna's apartment complex, but claimed it was to confront Jenna about her relationship with Jared, not to plant evidence. The police also discovered that Amanda had researched poisons extensively in the months leading up to Jared's death. Her background as a chemistry teacher gave her the knowledge needed to plan and execute the poisoning. Detective Harper began to piece together a scenario where Amanda, driven by anger and a sense of betrayal, had orchestrated the murder to make it look like Jenna was the culprit. This new evidence put Amanda back in the spotlight as the primary suspect. The police intensified their investigation, gathering more details and building a stronger case against her. The discovery of the rat poison bottle near Jenna's apartment was the breakthrough they needed to move closer to solving the case and bringing Jared Mitchell's killer to justice. On September 20, 2018, after days of intense investigation and new evidence pointing toward Amanda Mitchell, the police made a decisive move. Detective Lisa Harper and her team had gathered enough information to identify Amanda as the primary suspect in Jared Mitchell's murder. They had found her fingerprints on the rat poison bottle and confirmed that she had visited Jenna Parker Breen's apartment complex just days before Jared's death. Amanda, who was battling the end stages of terminal esophageal cancer, was in a hospital in Greensboro. Despite her deteriorating health, the police needed to arrest her to charge her with Jared's murder. Detective Harper and her team arrived at the hospital around 11 a.m. with a warrant for Amanda's arrest. Amanda was in a private room, hooked up to various medical equipment. Her condition was critical, and her family was by her side. When the police entered the room, Amanda looked up with a mix of shock and resignation. Detective Harper carefully informed Amanda of her arrest and the charges against her. Amanda, frail and weak, did not resist. She understood the gravity of the situation and knew there was little she could do. As the police read Amanda her rights, her family members were visibly upset. They had been supporting her through her illness and were devastated to learn of the charges. Amanda's once calm demeanor now showed a hint of defeat and sadness. Despite her illness, Amanda was taken into custody, with the police making arrangements for her to be transported to the local jail for booking. The news of Amanda's arrest spread quickly. Local media outlets covered the dramatic turn of events live, showing footage of the police arriving at the hospital and Amanda being wheeled out in a wheelchair. The community was shocked to see Amanda, who had been seen as a victim of betrayal, now facing serious charges. Amanda's arrest was a significant moment in the investigation. The police believed that Amanda had carefully planned Jared's murder out of anger and a desire for revenge. Her knowledge of poisons from her chemistry background, combined with her recent actions, painted a clear picture of her involvement in the crime. The arrest marked the beginning of a new chapter in the case. With Amanda in custody, the focus shifted to the legal process and the trial that would determine her guilt or innocence. The community, still reeling from the shocking developments, awaited the next steps in the case with bated breath. Amanda Mitchell's trial for the murder of Jared Mitchell began in early October 2018, just weeks after her arrest. The trial was held at the Guilford County Courthouse in Greensboro, North Carolina. The courtroom was packed with media who were eager to cover the high-profile case. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Hannah Foster, argued that Amanda had meticulously planned Jared's murder out of anger and a desire for revenge. Foster presented evidence showing Amanda's fingerprints on the rat poison bottle and her visits to Jenna Parker Breen's apartment complex. She highlighted Amanda's knowledge of poisons from her time as a chemistry teacher and her motive rooted in betrayal and suffering. Foster's arguments painted a clear picture of Amanda as the mastermind behind the crime. Amanda's defense attorney, Robert King Clark, argued that Amanda's terminal illness had left her too weak to commit the murder. He suggested that someone else, possibly Jenna or Brian Hart, could have been responsible. King Clark claimed that Amanda's deteriorating health made it impossible for her to plan and execute such a crime. He tried to cast doubt on the evidence presented by the prosecution, but his arguments did little to sway the jury. The trial was emotional for everyone involved. Jared's family, including his children and close relatives, attended each day, visibly distressed by the proceedings. They had been waiting for justice for Jared and hoped for a verdict that would bring them some closure. Tragically, just 3 days before the verdict was to be announced, Amanda Mitchell passed away in the hospital from her terminal cancer. Her death was a somber end to a complicated and painful case. Despite her passing, the court decided to proceed with a posthumous verdict. The judge ruled that Amanda was guilty of Jared's murder based on the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial. The verdict was announced on October 12, 2018, and was covered extensively by local media. The community was divided in their reactions. Some felt that the posthumous conviction was a necessary step to ensure justice for Jared, while others felt conflicted about convicting someone who had already died. Amanda's death did not bring the closure that many had hoped for, but it marked the end of a tragic chapter for Jared's family. They could finally start to move on, knowing that the legal system had addressed the crime. The case left a lasting impact on the Greensboro community, highlighting the complex nature of justice and the human emotions involved in such a heart-wrenching story. After Amanda Mitchell's death and her posthumous conviction for the murder of Jared Mitchell, the lives of those involved continued to be affected by the case. Jenna Parker Breen, who had initially been a suspect in the case, saw her life turn back to a degree of normalcy after Amanda's arrest and conviction. The trial had left a mark on her reputation, with her followers and the public scrutinizing her every move. Jenna took a step back from her influencer career, focusing on rebuilding her life away from the public eye. She moved to a different city, seeking a fresh start and attempting to distance herself from the media attention that had followed the trial. Brian Hart, the third suspect in the case, was cleared of any wrongdoing once Amanda was convicted. However, the ordeal had taken a toll on him as well. His professional and personal life were affected by the intense scrutiny and the revelation of his involvement in spying on Amanda. He continued to work as a high school chemistry teacher but struggled with the damage to his reputation. The community's perception of him remained mixed, with some viewing him as a supportive friend and others questioning his motives. Detective Lisa Harper, who had led the investigation, reflected on the complexities of the case. She and her team received praise for their thorough work. But the case also highlighted the challenges of dealing with such high-profile investigations. The community recognized their dedication, and local media outlets frequently featured interviews with Detective Harper discussing the challenges and achievements of the case. In Greensboro, the case remained a topic of discussion. It served as a reminder of the deep personal impacts of crime and the legal system's role in seeking justice. The city tried to move on from the tragedy, but the story of Jared Mitchell and Amanda Mitchell continued to be a part of local history, remembered for its emotional depth and the lessons it imparted. This case is a stark reminder of how betrayal and desperation can lead to unimaginable acts. Jared Mitchell's story is a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and revenge, highlighting the dark depths of human emotion. Daisy Winnows was a pillar of the Torrington community, known for her vibrant personality and infectious smile. Widowed after the passing of her beloved husband, Carl, the previous year, Daisy channeled her energy into running a popular flower shop, aptly named Petals and Blooms. Prior to her entrepreneurial venture, she had dedicated years of her life to shaping young minds as a beloved kindergarten teacher at Torrington Elementary School. Despite her professional success, Daisy's personal life was marked by estrangement from her adult children, who resided in different states. The specifics of their fractured relationship remained a mystery to town residents, but Daisy held on to a glimmer of hope that one day they would reconcile. She yearned to witness the formation of their future families, an aspiration that fueled her every waking moment. In January of 1982, as the harsh winter gripped Torrington, Daisy's life was abruptly cut short. The news of her murder would send shockwaves through the tight-knit community, where such heinous acts were unheard of. Residents who once felt safe walking the streets at night now clutched their loved ones a little tighter, haunted by the chilling realization that evil could lurk in their midst. It was a frigid morning on January 12, 1982, in Torrington, Connecticut. The temperature had dropped to -4 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, and the town was covered in snow. Most residents were still indoors, trying to stay warm and catch up on the news. But for one young man, the day would be marked by a horrific discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Wally Nathaniel, a 17-year-old high school senior, had a part-time job as a delivery boy for the local newspaper, the Register Citizen. He had been working for the paper since he was 14 and knew the town and its people well. One of his favorite stops was Petals in Bloom's, a quaint shop run by Daisy Winnows, a 67-year-old widow and former kindergarten teacher. Wally admired Daisy for her cheerful demeanor and kindness and often chatted with her when he dropped off her paper. That morning, Wally arrived at Daisy's Flowers around 9:35 a.m. as usual. He noticed that the shop's door was slightly ajar, which was unusual for Daisy and unusual given the cold weather. Wally knocked on the door, but there was no answer. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, calling out Daisy's name. What he saw next made him scream and drop his papers. Daisy was lying on the floor behind the counter, surrounded by a pool of blood. Her arms were almost cut off, and her face was unrecognizable. She had been brutally murdered, apparently with a large knife or a machete. Wally ran out of the shop, terrified, and called the police from a nearby payphone. The murder of Daisy Winnows would become a mystery that baffled authorities. Who would kill a harmless old lady in such a barbaric way? What was the motive behind this senseless crime? And where was the killer? These questions remained unanswered for months until a surprising twist in the case revealed the shocking truth behind Daisy's death. As soon as Wally Nathaniel reported his grisly discovery, the Torrington Police Department sprang into action. Within minutes, several patrol cars and an ambulance arrived at Petals and Bloom's, followed by a forensic team and 2 homicide detectives. The shop was quickly sealed off with yellow tape, and curious bystanders were kept at a distance. The detectives in charge of the case were Michael Harrison and Sarah Jones-Levy, both seasoned veterans with impressive track records. They had worked together for over 5 years and had solved some of the most challenging cases in the state. They were known for their thoroughness, professionalism, and dedication. But even they were not prepared for the horror that awaited them inside the shop. As they entered, they were greeted by a scene of carnage that made them gasp. Daisy Winnows, the victim, was lying on the floor behind the counter, her body mutilated beyond recognition. Her arms were almost severed from her torso, and her face was slashed beyond repair. She had suffered multiple stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, and neck. Blood was everywhere, staining the floor, the walls, and the flowers. The detectives quickly surveyed the scene, looking for clues. They noticed that the shop was in a state of disarray, as if a struggle had taken place. Flower pots were broken, vases were smashed, and petals were scattered. A trail of bloody footprints led from the counter to the back door, indicating that the killer had fled that way. The back door was unlocked, and there were no signs of forced entry. The detectives also spotted the murder weapon, a large cleaver, lying on a table near the door. It was covered in blood and fingerprints. The detectives wondered how the killer had obtained such a weapon and why he had left it behind. They proceeded to collect evidence, taking photos, measurements, and samples. They also interviewed Wally Nathaniel, the delivery boy who had found the body. He was still shaken by the ordeal and could not provide much information. He said he had arrived at the shop around 9:35 a.m. and had found the door slightly open. He had entered calling out Daisy's name and had seen her body. He had run out screaming and had called the police from a nearby payphone. He said he had not seen anyone else around the shop and that he had no idea who would want to kill Daisy. The detectives thanked him for his cooperation and told him they would be in touch. They then contacted the coroner, who arrived shortly after. He examined the body and confirmed that Daisy had died from blood loss due to the multiple stab wounds. He estimated that the time of death was between 9 o'clock and 9:30 a.m., based on the body temperature and rigor mortis. He also noted that Daisy had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting that she had tried to fight off her attacker. The detectives were puzzled by the motive behind the murder. Daisy Winnows was a well-liked and respected member of the community, with no known enemies or problems. The detectives decided to look into Daisy's personal life, hoping to find some clues. They also hoped to find some witnesses who might have seen or heard something suspicious around the shop that morning. They knew they had a tough case ahead of them, and that time was of the essence. They had to catch the killer before he struck again. The first person that detectives Harrison and Jones Levy wanted to talk to was Nick Hasselby, Daisy's boyfriend. Nick was a 41-year-old plumber who had met Daisy 6 months ago when he had fixed a leak in her shop. They had hit it off and had started dating soon after. Nick was a handsome and charming man who had a reputation for being a ladies' man. He had been married twice before and had several girlfriends in between. He was also 26 years younger than Daisy, which raised some eyebrows in the town. The detectives wondered if Nick had any motive to kill Daisy. Could he have been after her money or her shop? Could he have been jealous of her relationship with her children or someone else? Could he have been involved in some shady business or had a secret enemy? They decided to find out. They tracked down Nick at his apartment, where he lived alone. They knocked on the door and Nick opened it. He looked surprised to see them and asked them what they wanted. They told him they were investigating Daisy's murder and asked him if he could come with them to the station for some questions. Nick agreed and followed them to their car. At the station, they took Nick to an interrogation room where they asked him about his relationship with Daisy. Nick said he loved Daisy and that they were very happy together. He said he had no idea who would want to kill her or why. He said he had nothing to do with her death and that he was heartbroken by the news. He said he had last seen her the night before, when they had dinner at a local Italian restaurant, and then went back to her place. He said he had left around 11 o'clock p.m. and had gone straight home. He said he had an alibi, his neighbor, who had seen him arrive and leave his apartment. The detectives asked him if he had any problems with Daisy or anyone else. Nick said he had not, and that he got along well with everyone. He said he had no enemies, no debts, no secrets. He said he had a good job and a good life. He said he had nothing to hide. The detectives were not convinced. They pressed him harder, trying to find any inconsistencies or contradictions in his story. They asked him about his past marriages, his previous girlfriends, his financial situation, his hobbies, his friends. They asked him if he had ever been violent or had a criminal record. They asked him if he had ever cheated on Daisy or had any other lovers. They asked him if he had ever argued with Daisy or had any disagreements. They asked him if he knew anyone who might have a grudge against him or Daisy. Nick denied everything. He said he was faithful, honest, and peaceful. He said he had never hurt anyone or done anything wrong. He said he had no enemies, no rivals, no conflicts. He said he only loved Daisy and wanted to be with her. He said he was innocent and begged them to believe him. The detectives were not sure what to think. Nick seemed sincere, but also suspicious. His story was consistent, but also convenient. His alibi was solid, but also shaky. His motive was unclear, but also possible. They decided to keep him under surveillance and to check his background. They also decided to look for other suspects who might have a stronger connection to the crime. While Meg Hasselby remained a prime suspect, the detectives did not rule out other possibilities. They decided to look into the last person who had seen Daisy alive according to the shot's records. That person was Danny Waters, a 24-year-old man who had bought a bouquet of roses from Daisy at 9:15 a.m., just 20 minutes before her body was found. Danny Waters was an odd and lonely figure in the town. He lived with his mother, Carla, who ran a car wash on the outskirts of Torrington. He had no job, no friends, no hobbies. He rarely left his house, except to run errands for his mother or to visit Daisy's shop. He was also illiterate, having never attended school or learned to read or write. The detectives were curious about Danny's relationship with Daisy. Why did he buy roses from her that morning? Who were they for? What did they talk about? Did he notice anything unusual or suspicious? They decided to pay him a visit. They drove to the car wash, where they found Carla Waters working. She was a 49-year-old woman with a stern and weary face. She greeted them coldly and asked them what they wanted. They told her they were investigating Daisy's murder and that they wanted to talk to Danny. Carla said Danny was not home and that he had nothing to do with Daisy's death. She said Danny was a good boy who never hurt anyone. She said Daisy was a nice lady who was kind to Danny. She said they had no reason to kill her. The detectives asked Carla if they could search her house, and she reluctantly agreed. They followed her to a small and shabby house next to the car wash. They entered and were struck by the smell of dirt and decay. They searched the house, looking for any clues or evidence. They found nothing of interest except for a cardboard box in the attic, where Danny slept. Inside the box, they found a pile of books, magazines, and newspapers. They were puzzled by this, since Danny was illiterate. They asked Carla about it, and she said Danny liked to look at the pictures and that he collected them as a hobby. The detectives were not satisfied with this explanation. They took some of the books and magazines with them and left. They took them to the station, where they examined them more closely. They were shocked by what they found. The books and magazines were all about flowers, gardening, and nature. They were all marked with notes written in a childish and clumsy handwriting. The notes were simple words such as rose, sun, love. The detectives realized that these were not just pictures, but lessons. Someone had been teaching Danny to read. They wondered who that someone was, and they had a hunch. They checked the dates and titles of the books and magazines and compared them with Daisy's shop's records. They found a match. Every time Danny had bought flowers from Daisy, he had also received a book or a magazine from her. The detectives had discovered a surprising connection. Daisy, moved by Danny's illiteracy, had been secretly tutoring him in her spare time. She had been giving him books and magazines, along with notes and instructions, to help him learn to read. She had been doing this for months without anyone's knowledge. The detectives were amazed by this revelation. They wondered what Daisy's motive was and what Danny's feelings were. They wondered if this was a platonic or romantic relationship and how Carla felt about it. They wondered if this had anything to do with Daisy's murder. They decided to talk to Danny again and to find out more. The case seemed to hit a dead end as the detectives ran out of leads and suspects. Nick Hasselby and Danny Waters had solid alibis, and no other person had a clear motive or opportunity to kill Daisy. The detectives were frustrated and desperate as the media and the public demanded answers. Then, a ray of hope. A forensic technician, working on the fingerprint analysis, found a match. A single print left on the cleaver that was used as the murder weapon belonged to none other than Carla Waters, Danny's mother. The detectives were stunned by this discovery. Carla Waters had not been on their radar as she had no apparent connection to Daisy, except for being Danny's mother. She had also cooperated with the police and had allowed them to search her house. She had seemed indifferent rather than suspicious. The detectives wondered what Carla's motive was and how and why she had pulled off the crime. They decided to confront her and to get some answers. The fingerprint match was a game changer for the detectives. They had a new suspect and a new lead. They decided to dig deeper into Carla Waters' background and to find out what she was hiding. Carla Waters was a 49-year-old woman who had lived in Torrington all her life. She had never married and had raised Danny on her own. She ran a car wash on the edge of town, which she had inherited from her father. She was a quiet and reserved person who kept to herself and rarely socialized. She was also fiercely protective of Danny, who she considered her only reason for living. The detectives also learned that Carla had a troubled past, marked by trauma and abuse. She had become pregnant with Danny at 15. She had never told anyone about it, and had given birth to Danny in secret. Carla had developed a twisted form of maternal obsession, bordering on abuse. She had isolated Danny from the world and had denied him any education, socialization, or normalcy. She had forced him to eat only raw barley like a horse and had made him sleep naked in a cardboard box in the attic. She had controlled every aspect of his life and had convinced him that she was the only person who loved him and cared for him. The detectives also learned that Carla had a paranoid and delusional personality fueled by her guilt and fear. She had believed that Danny and Daisy were having sex and that they were plotting to kill her. She had spied on them and had seen them exchanging books and notes. She had misinterpreted their innocent gestures as signs of betrayal and conspiracy. She had become consumed by an irrational jealousy and had decided to take matters into her own hands. The detectives had enough evidence to arrest Carla and to confront her with the truth. They went to her house, where they found her sitting on the couch, watching a replay of Donahue. She looked calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. She greeted them politely and asked them what they wanted. They told her they had a warrant for her arrest and that they knew she had killed Daisy. They showed her the fingerprint match and the books and notes they had found in Danny's box. Carla's demeanor changed instantly. She became agitated and defensive and denied everything. She said they had no proof and that they were lying. She said she had nothing to do with Daisy's death and that she loved Danny more than anything. She said Danny and Daisy were the ones who had killed her and that they were trying to frame her. She said they were evil and that she deserved to die. The detectives were shocked by Carla's reaction. They realized that she was mentally unstable and that she had no remorse or regret. They handcuffed her and took her to their car. They also called Danny and told him what had happened. Danny was speechless and could not believe that his mother was the killer. He said he was sorry for Daisy and that he had no idea what his mother had done. The detectives had solved the case, but they had also uncovered a dark and tragic story. A story of a mother's love gone wrong and a son's life ruined. A story of a woman's madness and a town's horror. A story of a flower's beauty and a murder's brutality. The trial of Carla Waters began on March 15, 1982 at the Litchfield County Courthouse. The judge presiding over the case was William Balls, a respected and experienced jurist. The prosecutor was Emily Carter, a young and ambitious assistant district attorney. The defense attorney was Thomas Hines, a seasoned and skillful public defender. The prosecution's case was built on the fingerprint evidence, the books and notes found in Danny's box, and the testimony of Danny and the detectives. Emily Carter portrayed Carla as a cold-blooded and calculating killer who had planned and executed the murder of Daisy Winnows out of a twisted sense of control over her son. She argued that Carla had acted with premeditation and malice, and that she deserved the maximum penalty, life imprisonment without parole. The defense's case was based on Carla's mental state, her abusive past, and her lack of criminal record. Thomas Hines argued that Carla was a mentally ill and traumatized woman who had suffered from a psychotic break and had acted under the influence of a delusion. He pleaded for the jury's mercy and compassion and asked them to consider a lesser charge, manslaughter. The trial lasted for 2 weeks and was filled with dramatic and emotional moments. Daisy's friends and colleagues testified about her kindness and generosity and expressed their grief and outrage. Danny testified about his mother's abuse and his relationship with Daisy and broke down in tears. Carla testified in her own defense and maintained her innocence and her delusion and showed no remorse or empathy. The jury, composed of 6 men and 6 women, deliberated for 3 days. They reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the arguments. They weighed the facts, the emotions, and the law. They debated, argued, and voted. Finally, they reached a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was announced on March 29, 1982 at 4:15 p.m. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman read the verdict. Then a wave of reaction swept the room. Some gasped, some sobbed, some cheered. Carla Waters showed no reaction and remained expressionless. Judge Bowles thanked the jury for their service and pronounced the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He ordered Carla to be taken away and adjourned the court. For Daisy's family, the verdict was a bittersweet closure. They finally learned the truth about their mother's final days and saw justice done. But they also felt the pain of their estrangement and the loss of their chance to reconcile. They hugged each other and vowed to stay in touch. The trial of Carla Waters was over, but the aftermath of her crime was not. The lives of those affected by her actions were forever changed, and they had to find a way to move on. Danny Waters, the son of the killer and the friend of the victim, faced the most challenges. He had been freed from his mother's tyranny, but he had also lost the only person who had shown him kindness and compassion. He had to deal with the trauma of his past and the uncertainty of his future. He had to learn to read, to work, to live. He did not have to do it alone, though. He received extensive therapy and support from the community, who rallied around him and offered him help and hope. He also received a generous donation from Daisy's family, who forgave him and wished him well. He eventually found a job at a local bookstore, where he developed a passion for reading and learning. He also found love and married a young woman who accepted him for who he was. He had a son, whom he named Carl after Daisy's late husband. He never forgot Daisy and kept a picture of her in his wallet. He visited her grave every year and thanked her for changing his life. Detectives Harrison and Jones-Levy, the heroes of the case, also faced some challenges. They had witnessed one of the most tragic and twisted stories of human nature. They had seen the best and the worst of humanity, and they had been affected by it. They continued their careers, but they also sought counseling and support. They vowed to bring justice to victims and closure to their families, but they also learned to cope with their own emotions and stress. They remained partners and became friends. The town of Torrington, the scene of the crime, also faced some challenges. It had been shaken by the events of that winter and had lost some of its innocence and security. It had to deal with the stigma and the sorrow, and to rebuild its reputation and its spirit. It did not have to do it alone, though. It received support and sympathy from neighboring towns and cities, who offered their condolences and assistance. It also received recognition and praise from the state and the nation, who applauded its resilience and courage. It gradually healed and regained its peace and harmony. Daisy's flower shop, now owned by a young couple who had admired her work, remained a landmark, a silent reminder of the vibrant life cut short and the enduring complexities of the human condition. The case of Daisy Winnows serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and the darkness within the human heart can manifest in unexpected forms. It is a story of love, loss, twisted obsession, and the lengths some are willing to go to in the name of a warped perception of control. It is a story that leaves a lasting impact, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of tragedy, an enduring search for truth and justice.